Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise. Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise. Those aren't cries of happiness. The cold steel of the gladiator's gladius. Tip sharp at the back of the neck, whether wanted or not. A revolution we're having. They're deep in the state of the program. They are deep in the state of the mind. Yeah. Deep in the pocket, deep in the slumber. They're deep in the government, and now they're above you. Everything I'm telling you, they'll tell you it's a heresy. Cause none dare would call it conspiracy. But I'm the kook, I'm a zealot, I'm a frog, I'm a lightning rod, I'm a right-wing nut job. I speak and the vampires shudder. Full throttle, no handle on the rudder. Unraveling voices stutter. Cut to the heart, hot knife through butter, huh?
Welcome to the stream, my friends. This is a little project I'm working on. Obviously, you can tell the content is related to things we'll be studying, so just like this beat, we'll write in with it, get the vibe going.
Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise. Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise.
It's a good Wednesday to be alive, my friends.
Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of.
I'm dancing right now, if you could see me.
Your 5 eyes unwise. Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing.
You should be too.
Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise.
Woo! Yeah, I don't know what the name of this one is. I have it titled 5 Eyes in my notes and just writing. This is how I usually compose, is I'll just put something on repeat. or you can go in here and just do a select section like this verse right here, or this section of this verse. I'm deciding whether or not I want to put anything during the slower bridge of the beat where it breaks down after
I'm a right-wing nut job,
where I go pretty hard here.
unraveling voices stutter, cut to the heart, hot knife through butter, huh?
It slows down. It's like, okay, do I just let everybody breathe for a little bit, bounce? I can see everybody at the church dance, right? Just kind of like swaying back and forth, even the wallflowers. I see you. And then we just drop it one more time.
Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective.
So I don't know. I might just do that. I mean, I could do some chants, some noises, some sound effects, some third person. There's a lot of things you can get creative. So I would just sit and listen to this over and over again on repeat. And other people, that might just be like
Unraveling.
annoying, boring, or anything like that. But to me, this is a good night. Like, this is inspiration. Putting myself in the right situation, listening on beat, like with the notepad and paper ready to go, and just writing. I think that's how it happens most of the time. Just a little repetition. So yeah, this is what I'm working on, called Five Eyes. And we'll get to Five Eyes. They're a part of the conspiracy. But I did finish another song that is, well, it was inspired, I guess, by my recent works and writings from Eternal Perspectives. So it's an Eternal Perspectives inspired tune. And it was the beat I was messing around with and playing for you guys last week. Just had kind of a flood of lyrical inspiration over the weekend for it. And I know it's a little repetitive. The chorus, this one's called Rising, is what I ended up calling it. It's called Dancing with the Dead Inspired. And maybe I should explain that, because last week, let me pull them up actually. First, before I do that, let me just make sure if somebody is here and can chat. Let me know if I'm coming through good, if everything looks nice. I have nobody to keep track for me. So, if everything's cool, give me a thumbs up. Perfect, man. First time chat. Abbott, cheers. Welcome. What's up, guys? All right, Illuminati Eye. All right, yeah, we're here. Awesome, guys. Perfect. And I'm going with a little different overlay here, because I hadn't intended to kind of go through Twitter and scroll as we were studying last time. That's why I had that up on the side, but never really got to it. Figured give more screen space for me to explain and do things, do the studying, do what I normally do, just groove, and then put a little chat overlay. And so that's kind of how I have it work today, but hope it works great. Okay, so what was I looking for? I'm jumping all over the place, but okay, so Dancing with the Dead. So my brother invited me to a concert last weekend, or a couple weekends ago. And I love my brother, and any opportunity I can get to hang out with him, I'm open for it. Now, he's not a member of the church, so I was a little suspect when the name of the headlining band was Dance with the Dead, and the imagery wasn't, something that the ladies that helped me at the temple today would appreciate, I don't think. But let's just go straight into YouTube, and then I'll play a little bit. I don't want to get in trouble with any copyright or anything, but just to give you a general feel of the type of music it was fantastic. It was amazing. Right up my alley. I grew up listening to Dancing with the Dead. I grew up listening to like Yngwie, heavy metal, Satriani, like, what do they call it? Neoclassical type metal. So I don't know if this might be a good one just to listen to. It's just super heavy guitar, chunk type rhythms, EDM, like fast paced. It's like horror movie type soundtracks vibes. Kind of that 80s stalker vibe, like Stranger Things, a reborn version of that here is what this band is all about. So it was just lots of lights, lots of awesome guitar solos. It was an amazing concert. It had me jumping, but I'm getting old, and the music was like pedal to the metal the whole time, and it was a little hard, but let me get back to my music here. That was the inspiration for this beat that I originally started doing, and let me see if I can just mute the audio for some of that to give you a sample of the beat, which is this beat, this whole rhythm, the melody, everything was inspired kind of by the minor tones and the diminished phrasings that were just polluting this whole style, this genre that I was exposed to the other Friday night. And I kind of knew this stuff existed, but I've been busy doing my own stuff, happy with my own music and things. That's why I haven't been exploring the new genres, the new things lately. And so I appreciate my brother for kind of, just helping me expand my vision a little bit. I can get even tunnel vision in my own craft. And so it was good. And so I'm just trying to get to the point that this is what inspired me for this. I actually wanted my beat to go harder. I have an electric guitar and I've got the amp and I could just hook it up and get it going. And I was going to overlay that on here and just kind of experiment with it first time. But I restringed my guitar recently and I didn't want to tune it. And it's on the wall hanging and it was just too much work. And I'm making excuses even now. So I didn't do it. But I ultimately was inspired with the lyrics here and it came through pretty nice. I like it. So let's give it a listen and I'll just kind of walk you through my inspiration for it, I guess. And the phrase there is rising, Saturn's crown, the heavens unite. And if you followed my Cosmism manifesto at all, it should be kind of obvious that it's a metaphor or an allusion to the rebirth, the resurrection of even the planets in the Planet Salvation. I mean, obviously, I'm pointing to the most provocative one in all of symbolism, but Saturn, right? And that its relation to Kolob that we explore in the manifesto and things like that. But just this return to a paradisical state, a temple state, where the Earth is in a paradisical, like a millennial temple state, a cosmic temple. That's what Saturn, the Saturnian golden age represents. So a return to that is a resurrection, a rising of not just Christ himself and bringing the dead from their tombs, but the earth from its fallen state into the womb, through the womb, right? Into a new life, its new resurrection. It'll be a transfiguration before its true resurrection, because that happens after the millennium and the final conflict. But this will be a raising of its state into a temple, a terrestrial type environment. And so that's what this is an allusion to. Saturn rising, Saturn's crown, right? That what is the temple but centered around kingship, Adam and Eve, around priesthood, the high priest, right? This whole notion of sharing in the ultimate glory of the Father, being brought into his same lifestyle. So that's what this is bringing a remembrance to, not anything nefarious at all. So. And those kind of like, in my mind, I see them as the Blue Men tube, like type of instrument, the do-do-do. It's like a xylophone type synthesizer that I'm using there. But it's so busy, I didn't want to throw in more lyrics on top of it, even fast rap, to just muddle up the whole rhythm of it. So I like that the rising echoes through. And I was hesitant to put so many repeating refrains of this rising in, but ultimately I did put in 12 symbolically, right? Just for my giggles. But I love how it resonates against the beat. Just the rising, like to me, I wanted to hear that. And so I don't care if everybody else thinks it's lame, but this was a cathartic song to me because these lyrics, they all just kind of came kind of in a blop, and that doesn't happen but rarely. So I get excited in them. So we'll keep listening. They don't want to see my sign, no. They don't want to behold my glory. They don't want to be reminded who will live to tell our story. They don't want to be of one mind. They don't want to be my people. And that whole verse right there is an allusion to basically like the pre-flood civilizations and being invited up to Zion and Enoch's city, right? And them rejecting him and ultimately being destroyed. But and it was Saturn's dissolution. You don't want to see my glory, right? This is Saturn's discharge that caused the flood and ultimately led him, away captive to the outer world, and us here stuck in the underworld. And that's kind of the allusion to this first verse. It's not a commentary on anything happening now or or whatever. I mean, it parallels the same apostasy we see happen throughout Israel's history and their rejection of becoming a Zion people, going up to the bosom of the Lord. And it can apply to us today, just as Isaiah points out, that it's the same inversion, even though Zion and its foundation is planted here through the church. So it's 3 deep, brah. But that's what this one is. So let's do it one more time.
They don't wanna see my sign, no. They don't want to behold my glory. They don't wanna be reminded who will live to tell our story. They don't wanna be of one mind. They don't want to be my people. Rising, Saturn's crown, the heavens ignite. 7 days of light you shine upon. With water baptize the earth. For another's light to shine would come, to raise the stars again to birth. Rising.
Now, I like this refrain because it backs up what I was suggesting here, that this is intent is like a pre-flood type narrative. And then here in this slowdown, this breakdown of the beat, and this kind of more of my attempt at like melodic singing. I'm not great, but my wife likes it, so I keep trying it. And so this whole refrain is like Saturn's discharge. This is the flood. And in the Velikovsky explorations that we've touched on in my other writings, it was 7 days of light before the rain came down, and there was 40 days of rain. And it was 7 days of light, and then Saturn moved from its position fixed in the north, and all heaven was broken up and dissolved. And so that's the old heaven breaking away, as Peter alluded to, and the flooding of the earth. And when the earth in that day, before this 7 days of light from Saturn and his glory being discharged on the earth to purge it, essentially. But then I have the allusion to Christ here being the one to raise not just, again, people, but these same planets that play a part in the plan of salvation. So it's just homage, this whole song and theme, to the cosmic layer that the manifesto brings. But so that's that. And then there's another verse here. I'll just jump to that.
They don't wanna see the heavens shake. They don't want to taste the fire. They don't wanna hear the echoes of the ancient burning choir.
So again, this is allusion to catastrophe. So obviously I'm always slipping this in my stuff, but they don't want to see the heavens shake. This is what we're talking about as we read Doctrine and Covenants here too, that we're getting into with the Perplexities. That this final work of learning how the final winding up scenes happen before the second coming, and then what? And then the heavens shake, and then God performs his strange act, where all of the earth is surprised, all of Babylon is thrown in disarray. But it's to the benefit of the saints that the heavens are shaken. So this is what I'm talking about. They don't want to see the heavens shake. They don't want, this is Isaiah's lament, that those who pray for the day of the Lord to come don't know what you're asking for. It's darkness, right? It's dark. It's death, destruction, it's plague, it's earthquakes, it's fire from heaven. It's loud sounds that will deafen many. So they don't want to see the heavens shake. They don't want to taste the fire. They don't want to hear the echoes of the ancient burning choir. They don't want to feel the power of the thunder in my eyes, is kind of how it goes in. So
They don't wanna see the heavens shake. They don't want to taste the fire. They don't wanna hear the echoes of the ancient burning choir. They don't wanna feel the power of the thunder in my eyes. Rising, Saturn's crown, the heavens ignite.
I love how it comes in so powerfully again there. In fact, I wanted it more powerful, and that's what I was talking about with the electric guitar and the Dancing with the Dead inspiration. I wanted more as it comes in here is rising, and then have like just super electric, just shaking the room. I wanted you to feel the heavens shake is the idea with like I imagine this too with playing out live in mind, because that was another takeaway in my notes of going to that concert with my brother was, man, I really got to start thinking of composing music and writing music for performing more than I do normally. Because I'm pretty much strictly a studio recording artist. I don't go out and perform. I don't really think of that. I just, as inspiration comes, I put it out and produce it and make it and go. And to me, it's an outlet for my creativity, for my talents, for my own mind control, right? My own indoctrination on doctrinal foundations. So like, it's to me a tool. But looking at it or going and listening to their performance type songs, that like every song just had me engaged and I couldn't stop. There wasn't a time to take a break because even their interludes were so intriguing that I was just like on my toes and still bouncing and waving and weaving. And I could feel it. It was great. It was wonderful energy. And they were able to keep it up for, 45 to an hour long. And it just inspired me too that like, man, if I were to ever, DJ or put together a bunch of stuff, like certainly I can do firesides with my songs, kind of like I'm doing right now with this, where we walk through the inspiration and the lyrics and the meaning behind them. And I think that's powerful, but also to just have a set that's just pure performance, that's just energy and keeping up that type of energy. I guess I don't know how else to say it, but it was inspiring. And so I made this with that in mind. But this interlude here, this bridge, this really techno sounding one, this whole idea is that it's kind of projecting a science fiction type atmosphere with all of the synthesizers that I used. But for this, I just wanted it to play solo, again, because it's so busy. But then there's a final verse here before the outro. So again, I just love that. I love those slow down death chant type knockoff Gregorian Hebrew sounding melodies and harmonies. That's what gets my jimmies rustling, right? That's what gets my soul going. And so I love throwing those in there. And then even more when I can tribute the Godhead here, or ode to the Son of Man, Jesus. Oh, glory to the Father of all, right? We're talking about glory and intelligence and Saturn's glory, and to not let it be confused, like who I worship and who my glory is my reference to. This is kind of an end cap to it. So I just love it. And then I repeat it here on the outro, just in a single voice, not in any harmonies, but so it builds up after that. So I let it end out with a ringing resolution, where finally those minor tones kind of even out and balance in the end, just for a second. And then even on the recorded track, I made sure to leave at least, I don't know how many seconds, it might be 10, 12 seconds, just after the ending to let it ring. That way, even on my playlist, when I'm playing it, there's enough pause that I want for like a break. I want it to resolve. I want it to end. I want your palette to reset. And then whatever comes next will be another thing. Like this whole song goes by and feels, it's long. It's like 5 minutes or something. So how long is it? Yeah, 5 minutes, 30 seconds about. And I want it to feel like a sunrise, like a sunset, like a cycle, like like 12 hours in the clock, right? Like that's exactly kind of how I framed it out with the 12 risings, and then how it resolves. So it's just this build. It's kind of repetitive, kind of the same boom bop hip hop stuff that I do, but this is what I like. This is what I resonate with. So this was the latest one, and again, like all this inspiration. Oh, not that inspiration. All this inspiration here just kind of hit me last weekend. So that was cool, and I'm sure speaking and hanging with you guys and committing to be out here helped me keep a positive mind state throughout the week, because I couldn't stop thinking about perplexities and stuff. So let's jump to it. I'm not going to save anything in case I messed it up there. Close out my lyrics here. Let's see. Ether asks, is this a song you're currently working on, or is this an example of how you produce music? So that's one I actually just released to my SoundCloud. I think it was last weekend. But it's called Rising. Yeah. So if you go to my SoundCloud, this is where I release all my new stuff. And I don't always make videos or post them to Twitter or to anywhere else like when I do, because like I said, to me, this is more of an outlet where I'm just constantly, like if you go to my tracks list here on my thing, I've got 130 something on here. Just if you keep scrolling, they keep coming. And it's because I make them, I write them, I produce them, I put them up. And then if I'm inspired to make a video or do something else afterwards, then I'll do that, and then I'll post it to my YouTube. And sometimes I think people are confused that like I'm putting a new song out there, when it might be that I'm just finally putting a video up for a song that I actually released on SoundCloud like 4 or 5 years ago. That's the case with, I think Abbott was saying he loves the America America song. Well, that's a song on my YouTube channel. It's not new necessarily. I just had recently posted it to Twitter is all. Because a lot of my content creation and stuff, I've already done a lot of it. It's out there, and it's just the tedious part for me of going through and sharing it or cutting it up into smaller chunks and getting it out there. And I just hate self-marketing myself, all the time with my music. But I mean, if I'm not doing it, nobody else is normally. So I'm my only hindrance in terms of getting my name out there. But like, let's see if I go to America, where are you? Moses Avalanche. I think it's one of the earlier ones that I did or made a video for. America, America. This is a good one too, fitting for our conversation. So this is 6 years ago. This is me 6 years ago. But listen, this is all about mind control. Hence the very abstract visuals that I definitely want it to be intriguing to people are at first watching, like, what the heck am I looking at? Like, what is this? I want it to be disturbing, because the lyrics and like a full consideration of them are. And that's kind of the whole idea behind this one. That's why it's called interruption. Interrupting your normal programming.
Cryptic sound.
They tell you what they want, so they tell you what to do. You tell them what you did, and then they tell you what they want again. Tell you what they want, so they tell you what to do. You tell them what you did, and then they tell you what they want again. Welcome to the vicious cycle. Make that money now, make that gold. Welcome to the vicious cycle. Live the kind of life where you can't say no. They tell you what they want, so they tell you what.
So it's really good. I mean, you could play that on the radio right now, in my opinion. Like, I think it's amazing. Like, it's one of my favorites. It's 6 years old, but only 800 something plays here, and a few, maybe 1,000 or so on my SoundCloud. But I mean, most of my stuff is just unheard, I think, is really what it is. And maybe it is not good, and just people don't like it, but it's good to me. But there's that one. And where is America? Just to prove that point, because I already closed out of YouTube. But America. Wow. Sorry, guys. That's annoying. Do it here. Yeah, so when did I post this? 6 years ago. So again, this is another pretty old one of mine. But America. So the things we're talking about, the things I'm diving into, again, this is not like new for me, but it's definitely a revisit, which is good. I have more information, more understanding myself now. So looking back at a lot of this stuff is good. But I'm doing this as like a bridge. I want to build a staircase. I want to leave the breadcrumbs to the gingerbread house, where I feel like I'm feasting on all the spiritually good, fattening stuff. Like, they're not going to eat us there. But I mean, get the metaphor is a bad one. But just I want to leave breadcrumbs and or a ladder or a trail or a rope or everything to be like, here's how I got to where I got to, and I want you to be able to have the same tools. I don't want you to lean on me for anything, but going back and showing the step by step, like here's the logical steps that I took to be like, oh, this is why studying these things are important. Here are the scriptures. Here are the commandments, essentially, to study exactly these things. And here's how they relate to the temple. And I have this pointed out. So I want to kind of go over that here because this is what I'm working on. But I don't know why I was ranting about that. Sorry, guys. But like this is a good revisit for me. But I want to visually map this out so that I can, again, make content to help educate and just make it more easily explained. And the more I do this, the more I map it out myself, the more I rehash it, the more I revisit things with more context added to it, the better you get at explaining it to others, the better you get at simplifying it, the more comprehensively you understand something. So it's never wrong to just keep revisiting something until you truly have a command of it. And that's what I do with the scriptures over and over. You just keep reading them over and over and over again, because nobody's going to have a total command of the scriptures in this life. I don't think with everything revealed today, it'd be pretty hard. Though I do understand that, like our prophet, President Nelson, I'm sure has a pretty photographic memory, could quote most scriptures verbatim, and I don't doubt that. Or even just with the companionship of the Holy Ghost, it doesn't matter what you can remember; it can bring it to your mind. So there's definitely perks to studying these things out, but also seeking the Spirit constantly, who can fill in the gaps for when we don't, we can't study enough. Just study all the things. So, but this is good. All right. So perplexities. Where was I? What am I doing? Supposed and such. Music's a bit niche for some people. True, but really great overall. We all look back on it and remember after this upcoming tribulation. Yeah. And my music for a long time, I feel like I was warning or making music for a future time when people would see like the meaning of it. And that's why I just am confident in continuing to make it, because it's like fine wine. The more it ages, the better it gets. And I think all things that are tapped into truth or have a doctrinal foundation or backbone to it are going to shine like that, especially as the rest of the world continues to collapse in its dilapidated Babylonian floating building here that we've got right in our graph here. So let me just dive in. I'll just explain what I've been doing, because I did do a little bit of stuff while we were gone. I couldn't help myself. I kept telling myself like, just save it for Wednesday when you stream so everybody can share and see how you're doing it. But I couldn't help myself. So if I'm sitting at my daughter's game or whatever, or I'm out at an event with family and I can be on my phone, instead of playing a game or something like that, I'm usually diving into the research and pasting stuff or messing with Chat GPT and asking certain questions about stuff. So I've already kind of been doing a little extra research here. But this was something I did want to address, where Ben last week did bring up how President Nelson used the word hasten or hastening 8 times, and even more so here in the most recent conferences. I'm still debating whether or not I want to throw that in, but that's why I brought in the scripture right above section 88:76 through 83, where we're talking about the perplexities and how we have to learn all these things. The scripture right before that is talking to us about, or commanding us to sanctify ourselves, to bring our minds out of idle thoughts, right? This is the mind control mission, to bring every thought unto the obedience of Christ, right? This is true purification, true sanctification, and the temple can help us do that, right? And that's why this is the olive leaf. And I say right a lot, and I just caught myself consciously doing that. I'm committing to stop, to try and do it less. But this is the olive leaf, a temple text, essentially, from Joseph Smith, from the Lord through Joseph Smith. And everything about it is preparing us for the temple. That's why these very commandments, these things that are expedient for us to understand pertaining to the kingdom of God, which would be centered around the temple, is a temporal curriculum. So I've extrapolated out verse 79 here into some bullet points just to make it easier to see. So here are the things that that are expedient to understand. We talked about this last week, so I'm sorry to repeat, but not sorry. Things in heaven and in earth and beneath the earth, or under the earth, I guess I should say, to be more correct, and under the earth. Well, what does the temple do? But it has, where the sealing power is present, especially, right, where it binds, it connects things in heaven with things on earth and things in the underworld, the spirit world. So things under or within Sheol, right? The underworld is usually considered under the earth, if you're talking about that. So this is a temple understanding, right? Things past, present, and future, like signs of the times, is what this shortly come to pass directly references, like scriptures in Malachi and things that were quoted to Joseph Smith as he was called to be a prophet, that these things would come to pass, the second coming, essentially, right? So that's why I put signs of the times. Well, what is that? But temple as prophecy and revelation, the witness of Christ. It's exactly what the temple is. It's prophecy. Now, what else? It says things at home and things which are abroad. And then also the wars and the perplexities of the nations, and the judgments which are on the land, and in knowledge also of countries and of kingmen. And these all kind of fit into the other broader context of what the temple curriculum is. What is this? Things at home and things abroad. Kingship responsibilities for those anointed as such to rule and reign forever, right? We're going to have to understand these types of duties. Don't shirk your duty. Know who you are. Know what your role is. Again, wars and the perplexities of the nations. Well, that's another aspect of protecting the kingdom, where the temple is the political center of all things. That's anciently what it was. That's where the Romans had their augurs, where before you would go to war, you would consult the prophets or the seers, the oracles, right? The ladies muttering dark sentences, and you have your politicians or your high priests interpret them for you, whether you go to war or not. This was the temple's duty to dictate nation, protection and wars and perplexities and things like that. So again, if we're talking returning to the ancient way, the paradisical way, a terrestrial kingdom, where a kingdom actually exists, the kingdom of God, and there's a king and his vassals, right? His subjects, his servants. Well, then this language is on par. And also judgments, which are on the land. Well, who issues and where is the judgment issued from? But the temple, the mercy seat, the seat of judgment, the throne of God. Knowledge of countries and kingdoms. Well, interkingdom ministry or relations is a king's responsibility. That is things of kings and kingdoms. So again, this whole section that we're diving into, that we're going to base what we're building out, this curriculum of studying the perplexities of nations and taking modern prophets and their cues and the resources they point to as how do we understand the two rivaling kingdoms here? As we've identified them in other writings as Zion versus Babylon, or the house of God versus the house of devil, or as Lehi and Nephi saw it as the church of God versus the church of the devil. Why are they the same? Why does it matter? What kingdom of God, kingdom of devil, church of God? Because again, it's all the same thing when we're talking about restoring and returning to ancient things. This is the dispensation of the restoration of all things, is it not? Well, then we're going to see a reversal of political ideas across the nations. This is why the nations fall, and what rises but the kingdom of God. This stone cut forth without hands, right here. All these graphs I've got pulled up just help to nail down these points, and I'm just kind of freestyling on it now to just point out why I have it all here. But I'm putting these here so that eventually I can make slides, again, just reiterating why and what I'm doing. That will be part of a more honed presentation, something that's cut down and cultured and practiced, right? Something that I take serious. Not that I don't take this serious, but here I'm just inviting you to see how I study and map it out and be here. Okay. So again, this is just the temple is where all of this comes together, both things ecclesiastical, prophetic, right, and things political, things having to do with the governance. And there are these here's a scripture that we should be familiar with too as we get started on understanding the perplexities. And this might even be worthy of a slide just to go in and connect this to everything. To say, the interpretation of Revelation 12, where there appeared a great wonder in heaven and a woman clothed with the sun. Now there are many layers to understand this. Again, if you understand how we filter things through a cosmism perspective, you don't jump to conclusions about, well, that just happened in 2017 and I was there and I saw it. Like me too, I was there. That's great. But remember that there are many layers and that prophets have spoken about what this is interpreted as in certain layers. And those layers that affect geopolitical things and are connected to the downfall of nations and Daniel's dream and stuff, they've already been spoken on, right? It's a prophet's duty to expound on those things. And so here you have this section here where a woman clothed in the sun and the moon under her feet and upon her head a crown of the 12 stars. This is identified by Joseph Smith as the church. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. Here comes the beast of Daniel's vision, right? This final evolved beast through the ages of the Gentiles. We see them as metals here, but they can also be beasts evolving, from a lion to the bear to the liger, 4-headed thing to the dragon and beast. It evolves in the same aspect. And so here we have this political kingdom challenging whatever is happening through the church and her restoration, her birth, because she's having a man-child, a baby, being with child, travailing to be delivered, right? She's about to have this political kingdom is what I'm getting at, what the representation is. I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, but okay, so here's the beast, verse 4. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered. And this is funny, too, when you compare some of this to the early apostasy of apostles and things in the times of Joseph Smith and the Restoration. I know who is it? What's his name? Maybe somebody will remember. Somebody, he gives regular like sermons to groups. I know him. I can't recall his name right now, but he does a good presentation tying this as well to the establishment of the church and some of the apostles going apostate and things like that. But the dragon stood before a woman, and the dragon, this beast, right, this thing swaying the stars and the people of the world. That these are, I mean, it's a political kingdom. This is Babylon established. This is the secret combinations, the conspiracy that we're going to be exploring and mapping out. Again, thanks to Ezra Taft Benson, and none dare call it conspiracy, and other cues from modern day prophets. Even Joseph Smith himself, who said we shouldn't talk about these things because it brings stress upon the church, and her mission is not yet to like fight the dragon. That's not it. The king is going to come and put the dragon in her place, right? So again, here we have the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered. So she's about to have this political kingdom, and the dragon's going to eat it up, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And I would say this is the Council of 50. And this is Joseph Smith setting up a political kingdom, like literally, that Christ would come and inherit, essentially, that they'd pass off to all the dispensation heads up to Adam, who would then give it to Christ. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days. Okay, so she leaves and goes to the mountain west for a while, right, where she's fled in the wilderness as the man-child is taken up. And the political movement within the church was not pushed, and the woman kind of went captive to a now corrupt America, which is why I call it Egypt in that poem, where it say America. It's now we're like Israel, captive to Egypt once again. Joseph being sent out to the fertile land to prepare for the famine. Essentially, that's kind of how modern day Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh have been sent out to America, modern day Egypt, to prepare the return of the 10 tribes, all the tribes, the gathering of Israel, and to bring those covenants and the bounty of celestial glory, essentially the paradise, to those who endure. So, okay, now I'm ranting. But so that's what this is. And I think I have the relevant Institute manual snip right here, where it says, these clarifications confirm that Satan will not prevail in his war against God's kingdom on earth. They also teach that the woman represents the church of God, and that the child she gives birth to is the kingdom of our God and his Christ. The church of God is at this time an ecclesiastical organization only. But when the Savior comes again and makes a full end of all nations, remember, the Savior comes and he makes a full end of all nations, the kingdom of God will also have political jurisdiction over all people on the earth. The purpose of the church is to prepare its members to live forever in the celestial kingdom, or kingdom of heaven. During the millennium, the kingdom of God will be both political and ecclesiastical. This is like a basic doctrine when you're looking at things, but I see so many people who want to strip the prophets of their ability to see the unified picture of what's ahead. And they think that when they give advice, it's strictly political, or it's strictly one or the other. When it's like, guys, zoom out and see the picture that all prophets and all those who see true prophecy, past, present, future, all things circumscribed into one, have a greater vantage point than somebody who's viewing things through a small political or socially acceptable lens. And that's all the criticisms I see against Ezra Taft Benson or of that nature, where they can't see the bigger picture of what Zion is, what the restoration and the seedbed Joseph Smith laid is, and how indestructible it is, how it is going to succeed, how amazingly the infrastructure for everything we need is set up. Here are the societal pillars that the church and Joseph Smith and everybody sought to establish and almost succeeded in establishing before being captured, essentially, by America, right? You had government and a political system. That was finally in place with the Council of 50. And though there was no redress and even persecutions from certain state governments, governors, even the president himself, when they wouldn't answer Joseph's call for help and redress, well, then what? Joseph then began to run for president, and the Council of 50 was formed. And it was a council of both member and non-member. It was a very political organization, right? And as he put out his pamphlets and started writing and put his name out there to the world, essentially, to all senators and everybody running for president the next 1844, he was essentially assassinated conveniently a few months later. So it's just interesting how it fits with this whole setting up of the dragon seeking to snatch up the political kingdom of God. And it gets even funnier when you throw in the whole Illuminati chapter, the Order of the Halcyon, with John Bennett and who was the other scoundrel that tried to basically subvert the church after Joseph and Hiram's death. So again, it fits with this whole conspiracy narrative that we're going to be unraveling as a big tapestry. But just, again, I'm noting that there was clear government and political intent with the establishment of Zion, the establishment of the church and kingdom of God. Let's see. Abbott says, agreed, they're connected in a way we cannot clearly see. It would be interesting to see how many days passed between July 24th, 1847, and when the territory of Utah was established by the U.S. government in 1850. Absolutely. In fact, that's a good question that I want to copy and we'll explore. So I appreciate that, Dustin. Let me throw this down. Okay. No, now we lost our scratch. Going back into this, here are the other pillars of Zion established. And I haven't finished like exactly pinpointing them. This is what I was in the process of doing. But you had also a banking and finance system, right? How many times did the church try to set up banking and finance to keep things going and to keep society functioning and economy healthy? And everywhere, every town, every place that they made a paradise, this was attempted. And a lot of them failed. And a lot of it was the cause of much hardship and criticisms towards Joseph as a fallen prophet and things of this nature and stuff. So it wasn't that they weren't trying, but that this was in their intent and an attempt to really bring Zion, a political ecclesiastical structure, this whole kingdom of God, their attempt to say, hey, Lord, we're building what you need to return, kind of thing, or what you've asked of us to build upon your return. What else? Media and information. Do you think the early church and Joseph Smith had some things to do with printing presses and publications and pamphlets and printing of books? Yeah, definitely media and information played a huge role in the establishment of Zion and the recording of information, right? The documentation. How much documentation do we have in the early church? It's amazing. It's amazing because it was commanded by God. And people who have orderly minds, they order things by documentation. They do it. They write it down. Okay, so media and information. Yes, definitely. The pillars of Zion were being established through the church and Joseph Smith's efforts and the early prophets. Education system, anybody? Do we have the School of the Prophets, the early Relief Society? I mean, all different education type establishments. Every organization essentially in the church, even the priesthood, is an education type system. So I would say absolutely. And then you have the establishment of Brigham Young and other things down the road. And again, if I was a historian or people with more history knowledge, you know, they would go ham on each one of these points. You got to mean like you could do a whole seminar on just each one of these facets. But I just want to kind of snapshot things to keep everything parallel, because we're going to focus on the negative side of these very same things that are being subverted. Because we know who the prophets of Zion are. We know who the prophets of the kingdom of God are because they're very public. They do everything out in the open. All their writings and documents are there for us to search now. We're revealing them. We're putting them out there with the Joseph Smith papers and everything. Like, you can search through all the sermons Brigham Young gave. You can buy his book. I love it. You know what I mean? Like, there's no hiding what they did. Yet the prophets and the provocateurs of Babylon and this floating building, not so easy. So again, this is the effort, is to parallel these two things, where you have those builders of Zion on the restoration side of things, of this arm, building the restoration to the Zion and the house of God, the return of the Lord. And then you have the great apostasy, which continues with the house of the devil accelerating through their entire capture of these same societal pillars. Okay. Let me get back up to here so I know where I'm at, and then I see some chat. Let's see. Paste a link. Ben says it's 1143 or 1144 days, depending on how you include the day it was established in 1850. You can see 130. Abbott says it would have been great to see the kingdom 85-year-old Joseph Smith would have built. Yeah, well, had he lived to see 80, the Lord told him he would have built that kingdom to the Lord's coming. Instead, you have all kinds of ghost dance conspiracy happening in 1890, and that's around the time that Utah gets captured, I believe, right? What's the date there? You guys had it. Well, not when it came to territory. I'm talking about when it came a state, because it became a state. Let me see if I have it on this map. This is a different Miro map. So let me go back into my other one. No, it's in Babylon. By the waters of Babylon, we wept. We wept. Here. Okay. 1896, right? The Great Seal. So that's the capture date according to like what I'm looking at. But it might maybe the territorial date is something to keep in mind too. Now that you've mentioned it, I guess I didn't really consider it. So we'll put that in mind. But I had all of these things that were started and stopped before this date is kind of how I was seeing it or mapping it out here. Where you have, okay, let's just go from the beginning. You have the first vision in 1820, 1830, the Book of Mormon and the establishment of the church. 1836, the Kirtland Temple dedication and the Shekinah is what I have there. But that's the glory of the Lord returning, as Ezekiel saw, basically, or a version of it. Then you have 1841, polygamy instituted discreetly, right? And then in 1844, you have this government structure, the Council of 50, the Kingdom of God. And then this big red line is when they killed him. So this is the martyrdom. And this is, the keys and covenants were all restored. You had everything, the highest rights, the temple, and then Joseph's martyred after passing the keys to the apostles. And then, right before that, in 1843, his prophecy of civil war, and the Messiah appearance of 1890 that we're talking about, where he says, "My Joseph, my son, if thou livest until thou art 85 years old, thou shalt see the face of the Son of Man." That's what Abbott's referencing there, D&C 130. So good eye. I already had it in here. That's wonderful. But I have here, what do you have? You have the United Order was established in 1874. Again, this would have been the economic side of things. If we're looking at, I don't know, do I have economic here? I guess I don't have business. Maybe that's important. But because the bishop's storehouse and all of that would kind of be the same functionality. See, I haven't quite thought this through. I'm just making this up. I was like, 8's a good number. Let's do 8. So again, this is not academic. This is not do not be critiquing me for this. This is just to get some ideas out. We can make them 10 points, 12 points. But I think I might have to throw, well, I don't know, maybe finance. But business systems are a big part in the later corruption that I'm thinking about here, with the capture of everything by the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the J.P. Morgans of the world, and the big monopoly barons during the 1800s, during this buildup of the dispensation of deceit, their subversion of all things in the globe, like their building up of their anti-Zion. I think business is a big part, so we'll definitely have to include that. Dang it. Okay, let me make a note of that. Actually, I'll just throw it in here. Let's put it number 9. And we'll put a question mark so I read it like this when in my head. Business? That's what I'll read it like. Okay, let's see. 1896 is statehood. There we go. January 4th, 1896. Days to statehood, 17,000. I'm not great math on the spot guy. I'd have to calculate it and lame like that. But and I actually don't like number stuff. I get it, it's good, but to me, I want to see the big framework first to make sure any specific numbers that I'm driven to, that they are somewhere close within standard deviation of the big map. Do you get what I'm saying? I think some numbers, people can follow the numbers to plots on the map that are way outside frame. So to me, I like to keep it a little abstract, even when reading this passage here of Revelation 12, where you've got all kinds of numerology and numbers that we can go complex in our interpretation or deriving meaning, understanding from it. But again, for the sake of our intent, or my intent here, we want to stay general. We want to stay on the layers that connect to everything else. And I'm sure the numbers, I'm not saying they wouldn't. If we did go through the numbers, they would all line up if we're doing it correctly. It would be in harmony. But I think way too often, people who are way into the numbers, they demonstrate to me that they don't have a sound foundation in all the rest of how everything's connected. And so sometimes they get led off course. People who make timelines and dates and things like that. I'm making timelines here, I get it. But I mean, these are the things that have to happen, and here's the order and this and that. I wouldn't do that. Especially if you're not considering the electromagnetic nature of the universe and how when the heavens shake and things start to go crazy, that time itself is going to be warped. And so understanding how things might happen all at once or in succession rapidly, much faster than you would think on a timeline. Most people's timelines aren't taking all of that into consideration. Maybe. I just don't look at them. I'm busy. Okay, so what else? Again, building pillars of Zion. What else did Joseph do? Well, obviously religion and spirituality was a huge part of the establishment of the church, of the restoration. Science and technology, absolutely, right? This was, inspiration comes in all forms. There's even a great book that I have that I read in my 20s. It's on my list. Joseph Smith as Scientist. Can't remember who wrote it, if it was Pratt or what. Whitso? No, I can't remember. Let's look it up. Joseph Smith as scientist. Whitso is what I want to say. Yes, John Whitso. Man, that was a lucky guess. But this is a great book too. But just, I mean, if you want more evidence of like things that he taught and was inspired by through revelation, by having the gift of the Holy Ghost, right? And science and technology is definitely something the Lord's going to bless his people with. Just think of Nephi and their Exodus and the science and technology that was allotted them, not only in their record keeping and being able to forge materials and have plates that never faded, right? But that they had the Liahona and lots of other, I would say, ingenious ideas brought to them through revelation, just like building a ship and things like that. So, right, take your time. Regarding the age of the earth and all that. Agree that many numbers are important. This is Abbott. Agree the numbers are important. It's just that many second coming predictions have failed over millennia. Absolutely. Regarding taking the age of the earth and all that, death of Christ, except founder of Jehovah's Witnesses is a primary example. Exactly. Elena White or whatever her name was. And even Joseph Smith, I think, has a famous quote of, I think it was the Seventh-day Adventist founder who would predict the second coming in his day. And he was like, isn't it a great day for false prophets? He's like, smells like false prophecy. Like the day that Jesus was supposed to come. It's pretty based if you read in his journals. I'll have to find it. That's great. Okay. So yeah, science and technology, definitely something that the Restoration was a part of. Military and defense. Oop, can you say Capitan Joseph Smith? Right? Absolutely. Military General Joseph Smith and the Nauvoo Legion. Like we had an army that rivaled America. Like we were a threat. So absolutely, military and defense of our people was something that was taken seriously and organized, quite literally, through inspiration, revelation. Healthcare, absolutely, right? Same idea, same knowledge. Doctors. My great grandfather is a recipient, John Tanner, of the healthcare of the Lord. He was healed from a disease that allowed him to be baptized, and then he moved all of his family to Zion, essentially to the church. He gave all of his money to the Kirtland Temple and building it, and the building up of Zion. He truly consecrated his life, and I'm grateful for him forever. Joseph Smith gave a famous promise to John Tanner. He said, "May your family never want for bread, Father Tanner," something like that. Exactly like that, actually. Yeah. Okay, and then business. Healthcare and business, right? So again, I'm just mentioning each of these pillars, and I wrote this down because I know it's screwed up and get too wordy. Each of these pillars represent a critical point of manipulation, or we'll just say order, organization, administration would be. Let's put it in that way because I just copied this from when I wrote it for the Babylonians. Point of administration. Let's put righteous, just so we can be really blunt, and for those who aren't getting it, we're conspirators, where, let's say, priesthood holders. No, let's just say we're the righteous. Control system. Control. That's fine. We'll have that word be a good parallel to say control. Because that ultimately everybody wants to control. You need to control your own mind. You need to control your own thoughts. You need to control. You need to give up your will to God consciously. That's your control. So I like the word because it is forceful. It's like usually has a negative connotation, but in terms of like a race car driver, having wonderful control is a good thing, right? Like that's how I see it. Having control of a ship during a storm is important. So righteous control systems that impact every facet of daily life. See how I debate with myself and things? Like this is how I write and think and edit on things. And so sometimes it takes a long time because I'll just sit and read a paragraph and get nowhere, or make small critiques and then I'll walk away. But if you the trick is just consistently coming back, because then I'll sit back down and be like, oh yeah, what was I doing here? Oh, here we go, boom. And then I expand on it and write, and the inspiration comes quick. Okay. Through these pillars, they work to create a globalized, centralized system that diminishes, actually we'll say, that exalts individual freedoms, defends traditional structures, and consolidates power within a small elite. Well, that's true and let's keep that for the parallel, because that's kind of shocking. Like, oh, the small elite. But in the vast children of God, and you look at the children of Israel, essentially, the chosen children of the covenant, they are a small elite within the billions and billions of, if not trillions, of sons and daughters of our Father, at least in this earth's iteration. So now moving down, I have the floating belief. So this would be like the tree of life, right? Establishing a connection to the ancient ways where all of these things were controlled, even going back to Adam, to Enoch, to Noah, to Abraham, and making a same governing system, tree of life system that would allow us to fulfill the covenants given to Abraham. And that's what our prophet currently is just nonstop talking about, is the restoration of this failed attempt to reach Zion like the city of Salem did, or like the city of Enoch did. Abraham and his children's, it didn't make it through Moses. They didn't make it. But it was to the benefit of the rest of the world and all to the plans of the Lord, as he promised Abraham that it was through his seed that the rest of the world, the Gentiles, would be blessed. And it all culminated with Christ's first advent and his essentially setting up the kingdom on the earth through the ecclesiastical means first, with the structure and order of the church upon 12 apostles, that building block number. Once again, a change in times. And so you have that personified, embodied by the structure of his church set upon that. And so there you have this changing of times. And again, this all correlates. I have these planets on here because in my other writings, we talk about the literal physical changes of heaven and earth during these dispensations and how they coincide with catastrophes involving each of these specific planets considered solar ages, right? Or metal ages, like the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age. They all correspond with catastrophes involving different planets at different times that were called and worshipped as the gods. The planets like Jupiter, Saturn, like Mars, Venus, the sun itself, these were all substituted for Christ in the Gentile cults, the pagan cults of the world. So what was originally Christianity taught through Adam and his descendants was distorted through Cain and his descendants, obviously, right? There's a fork in the teachings very early on from somebody who witnessed God the Father himself even walking on the earth, right? So you have a distortion of ancient truths, but that dissolves over time. That's kind of this idea. So yeah, I love that. Who was it that said, it was Adam, I think, that tweeted out recently. He's like, it's not that the Christians stole pagan symbolisms and traditions, but that the pagans stole Christian symbolisms and traditions. And this is what he's hinting at, is that all of it stems from original truth that's been distorted through the bastardization of doctrines and the subjugation of the temple throne by heretic god kings like Nimrod, like Nebuchadnezzar, like Caesar, like Joe Biden. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. So anyways, so you have this whole setup. Anyways, this is what Israel is. This is what Joseph's helping to do, is he's reestablishing, okay, we got the structure, ecclesiastical structure going. Let's also set the seed of the government structure and let it lie in wait until the time is right. And we'll just keep gathering Israel and preaching the ecclesiastical side and making the call, putting up the ensign, the banner, saying, hey, y'all, time to choose sides, because the two churches are about to battle, essentially, right? These guys are going to rise up with a pit they've set, a snare they've set to try and snatch us up, but they're going to fall right back into it. So this is important to see. And as we read None Dare Call It Conspiracy, you're going to see every person they point to as being a prophet of deceit or a prophet of communism or this or that, or these ideological subversive ticks and parasites that were unleashed in the early 1800s. And even before that, with guys like Malthus and things like this, with the eugenics ideas of controlling populations and using them as like an ant farm. It's gross. But anyways, so these are important societal pillars that will be subverted by these same, again, they're the counter prophets, where it was prophets who helped establish all these things in Zion. It's the same idea. These notable figures that we study about in school and they praise, a lot of them are these agents of darkness that are setting up false philosophies of doctrine mingled with scripture, or sometimes not even, just a straight up antichrist. So what do they subvert? Where should we see these people? In government and political systems? Again, all these same things that I'll be redundant repeating them. So again, critical points of manipulation, and I've got just little sections kind of going over them. I had ChatGPT write these ones for me, so I can't take credit for them, and I won't make you sit and read them. But they're more for me as reading through them, and then I'll cultivate a slide with a few words or a few things, or maybe a small segment to read with the pictures to guide onto it if needed. But this just helps me see, because as we read the books, we're going to get names like, for example, let's throw one out, Karl Marx. Right? Obviously, this guy's mentioned not just in None Dare Call It Conspiracy, but in Naked Communist for sure. There's a whole chapter on him. There's a lot of mentions of Marx and communism in general, just in the Gospel Library, if you type it in. So it's like he's definitely one of the prophets of the dispensation of deceit. It's Karl Marx. So like, I'm going to throw his name out here. And then as we run into information about him, we're going to pin it on the board. We're going to make a timeline. We're going to show how all these guys pop up. in parallel to the prophets of the restoration all through these latter days, right? And maybe it gets exhausting, maybe not, who knows. And again, we're going to be reading in None Dare Call It Conspiracy, where some of these older dispensation guys that would be comparable to like the early prophets and apostles of the restoration of the latter days, we might have to dive into them individually and other things, because None Dare Call It Conspiracy was released in 1972, I believe, the first edition, and then the sequel called Call It Conspiracy, which is what we will actually probably read, because it's the same book but with additions, 15 years of additions. And it was released in 1985 by the same guys. And so I think we'll read out of Call It Conspiracy to get our bearings in terms of understanding it, just because it's the same book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, but with some additions. And the additions are like clearly demarked usually. But either way, it should be good. So where was I? But that book and a lot of the things it mentions are going to be further up in the timeline, like I was saying, up in the 70s, the 80s, and the transition during, like everybody likes to critique it for, well, those were Cold War things. He was talking about different time, a different era, different people. And that's a cute, quaint dismissal of what we're trying to describe. But what the book None Dare Call It Conspiracy and even The Naked Communist, what they're alluding to is not some decade conflict, but a subversive oligarchy, a deep state. That's what it's commonly called to and referred to today, that has been implanted and subverted our government for hundreds of years. That it's a conspiracy of history and not a coincidence of history of just, these phenomenal events that just happen to happen one after the other. No, everything's calculated and orderly and planned, because the kingdom of the devil is set up pretty much as a mirror of the kingdom of God. Because Satan's not original, my friends. Even from the beginning, he was imitating Christ and his patterns, his symbols. It's the same in his structure. And so if we look for the same kind of structure with some founding apostle, doctrinal setting type figures, who is it on the other side, on the Antichrist side, that is setting up doctrines, philosophies of men that void Christ, that negate the atonement, that preach against the first principles, right? It'll be easy to understand if we zoom out and see everything along those lines. Because then all the cute arguments of every postmodernist and liberal today, they're going to seem real stupid when you understand that they're on a floating, stinking building of lies. All of them. And everybody who dances on that building pretending to ride the line, the more the extremes get extreme, the more ridiculous they look. Defending this. Defending Satan. Please, my brothers, my sisters, don't do it. Okay, I digress. So, what do I want to do? Where do I want to start? Let me get a drink real quick. Abbott says, it really feels like we can relate to Noah or Abraham. Enoch and Melchizedek got to leave, but Noah and Abraham had to keep the earth for the return. It's true. But we also are unique in that every dispensation before us looked forward to our day. They wanted to be in our day, or they saw that our day would be so spectacular in the fullness of all the blessings that they just had parts of. Because we get to stay, but at the same time, Zion's coming to us. And we'll get to, I imagine, if we get to live to see the glory of that day, that we will be able to ascend up and down Jacob's ladder, right? Or perhaps because of the visitors who we will be able to engage with, they'll be able to teach us things that will satisfy every desire we've ever had to learn and to grow and to help and to serve. But it does. I do feel like we relate more to Noah and Abraham, though, in that you prepare to brace for a catastrophe. Although I'm pushing back mentally in that, just with my own framework, in that even Melchizedek, and I imagine Enoch, though we don't have a ton written and recorded about those days, lived through similar catastrophes, conflicts, upheavals of society. In the days of Sodom and Gomorrah and the total leaving of Salem and Melchizedek in their translation, it was a day of warfare. It was a day of tumult, and it was a day of them having to endure some tribulation and to stay faithful to the teachings of the patriarchal order and the things that they were able to maintain. The Enoch type gospel. So let's see. Oh yeah, okay. See, there's so many like little videos that I want to just have mapped out. So like even before we get into, we have to explain what Perplexities is, why we're studying these things, at least in my mind, set up, in my mind, the dispensation of deceit. So that's what this will be. Explain the dispensation of deceit. And that's what this division here, obviously, where I have it splitting, where you have Zion and then Babylon. Dispensation of deceit versus dispensation of the restoration of all things in the fullness of times. Should be obvious, especially when you have like Lehi seeing this in vision, teaching his children about opposites, Nephi expounding on the vision and how it leads up to Revelation and John's apocalypse and how he can't say more because he's seeing the very war that happens between these kingdoms before Christ himself returns in glory and honor. Like it's very beautiful when you see it together and you don't try and parse it out and get political with everything. When you're looking through it through a strictly social, political, scholarly microscope, you tend to get lost in the big picture. Okay. Here's how I was making images. I used Bing Image Creator, and I didn't like any of these floating buildings that they were giving me. So that's why I ended up going just with Lehi and a snip from the video, just because it shows Lehi and is conveying the message, even though I don't have the scriptures for Lehi yet. But they'll be right here talking about the division, the two churches, the two kingdoms being set up. Okay, I think maybe a good place to go would be just jump into the book finally. I know an hour into it, and everybody's like, I thought you were going to read this book. We will. We'll probably get through the prologue, and that's about it. That's worth it. Okay, again, we went over why we're looking at this, but President Ezra Taft Benson pointed to it. And I just want to say, I think it's funny, I threw on Twitter just like leading up to what I was going to talk about today because it's been on my mind. Again, like just how crazy it is that there are so many members of the church, especially the scholarly type, that are so comfortable just like throwing his counsel and what he pointed to the wayside because it's socially convenient for their careers, essentially, for them to be respected amongst those who don't call it conspiracy, who deny this. And I love the explanation here. So this will lay it out real nice for how I see it. I mean, if you were reading any of the comments today on my post, you'll see how they walk into it. They are self-fulfilling what this book is describing. So, and this is what President Ezra Taft Benson was like, hey, you should read this new book by Gary Allen called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. He's like, it's pretty good, guys. He's not saying like every fact in there you got to say take it as gospel. That's not when you have a prophet recommending a book, especially when it's a new book that's just coming out talking about current events. And it is kind of a political book for sure, right? Put out by the Birch Society, by people pushing against subversion of ideas and traditions. So of course it's going to have an aim and a direction. And we've got to do that to fight back against secret combinations. Otherwise they get above us. They've gotten above us. Because I think people were afraid to push back. I think how Ezra Taft Benson is treated is evidence of that. Is that even amongst the faithful here and those who should know better, like we're afraid to push back. Here's the acknowledgments. It's wonderful. Prologue by Gary North, he says. I'm not going to read that. It's boring. These first paragraph, he's like, I used to be a trivia. Who are these authors? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm not really interested. So let's say, how successful was the book? I'm jumping down here. If the number printed and sold is any indication, very successful. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And this is like 1985 where they're talking about it successful. And it's still out there being printed today. And it's, if you go on Truther Streams and stuff, everybody in the comment section knows about this book. It's like Conspiracy 101. Like you start here, guys. This is where you start. You don't jump into Frogland and everything else going on in the world and think you're an expert. Like you've got to get the foundation and kind of see history as it was dominoed out. So let's start here. Larry has at last revisited it. So this book, this is the sequel, and brought it up to date. The events of the last 15 years have served Larry's thesis quite well. As far as Larry is concerned, the history of 1970 to 85 has been a kind of giant grab bag of goodies that reinforce his original theses. Not the least of which was the creation by David Rockefeller of the Trilateral Commission in 1972, and the creation by David Rockefeller of Jimmy Carter in 1976. Okay, so again, now we have our first two people. So I want to go ahead and jump to our map. We're going to throw these out there already. So I'm going to just copy this. And these are going to be way far in the future, but we'll just start over here somewhere and talk about Trilateral Commission. Trilateral Commission. And now let's just get our bearings straight to see what are they referencing here. And we'll just go to Wikipedia first because that's a good place to start. Trilateral. And you can expect it's like state approved if it's Wikipedia, so you're not going to find any juicy conspiracy admissions outright. They'll always cushion it in some language. But I'm going to go ahead and copy a link for this and throw it over here by the trilateral. Oops, not inside it. Just underneath, it'll create this little tile that I like. Oh, it's really small. And we'll just start collecting information on the Trilateral Commission. And as we get info, as we study about it, and as I throw information, pictures, ideas, and we start to understand, like, let's get the logo. Let's get the Trilateral logo. Trilateral Commission logo. And I'll just do a quick image search. This is how I do it. And I'm like, wow, look, see how it's pretty consistent. It's like these 3 recycled arrows. It's like the 666 of Google Chrome almost. You have a 6 here, a 6 here. Oh my gosh, it's just evil incarnate. They're just flaunting the symbolism at it. And I believe that. Like, I'm being facetious in my tone, but in reality, when you have these groups that are created by known swamp creatures, known agents of the devil, essentially, it's pretty safe to say that though they might put a karmatic front, like throwing a good karma out by having philanthropy as a title or something that they pursue on the side, have no reservations to understand that these people are peddling their money to push terrorism on the world, to push revolution, cultural change, and not in the good way. They are definitely disciples of the Babylonian way here, of subversion, of domination, one world government. Okay, so there we have the Trilateral Commission. We got this cool logo. Let's read a little bit about it. I jumped too far ahead. So it says the Trilateral Commission is a non-governmental international organization. Okay, NGO for short. NGO international organization aimed at fostering closer cooperation between Japan, Western Europe, and North America. Interesting. So it's reaching across that other ocean. And let's see, these founders, interesting names here. David Rockefeller, Zbigniew Brzezinski. This will be another name inevitably in the book we're going to come across, and we'll have to make his own entry. This is another name. Like, if you're studying the deep state, if you're studying Babylon, Mystery Babylon, and who are the players today, this is a known name. Zbigniew Brzezinski. His daughter is Mika Brzezinski on Mika and Joe, The Morning Joe. Let me pull her up so you know who I'm talking about. Okay, so that known intel agent asset who helped create the Trilateral Commission with David Rockefeller, Mika Brzezinski. How do you pronounce your name? I don't know. Mika Brzezinski. Here she is. Okay, so let's see. Here she is on Morning Joe. And it's alleged that Joe Scarborough is
welcome, everybody.
Not a nice man. And
about knowing your...
anyways, it's this lady.
I walk in the door. There's literally 4 mistakes that women instinctively make. We're going to...
She's a constant face on your CNN, on your liberal news, on your fake news, Mockingbird, CIA media. Like, she is pumping out the state narrative. This is your government propaganda narrative coming straight from the daughter of one of the biggest movers in post-World War II restructuring of the deep state and their grab into more power and control. Zbigniew Brzezinski. He's going to be an important guy to dive in on. And then Jimmy Carter, again, somebody that they're mentioning right in line in our book as we're reading it here as being a creation by David Rockefeller of Jimmy Carter, which means he's obviously been financially backed by the Rockefellers, Jimmy Carter, and perhaps that's what I'm getting at. And we could probably find links to that, but we're just getting our bearings with this, right? So we understand the context of what's being said here. It says it was founded in July of 1973, a year after an Undare Cult Conspiracy came out. Interesting. Principally by American banker and philanthropist David Rockefeller, an internationalist, aka globalist, right? Think of that, who sought to address the challenges posed by a growing economic and political interdependence between the U.S. and its allies in North America, Western Europe, and Japan. The leadership of the organization has since focused on returning to our roots as a group of countries sharing common values, as a commitment to the rule of law, blah, 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 and falling asleep, open economies and societies, and democratic principles, right? It's a soft power projection tool. And if you know what that is, what is soft power? Soft power projection. Let's see if we can get an easy, quick definition, more than me stumbling on the idea. So power projection. In international relations, it's the capacity of a state to deploy and sustain forces outside its territory. So if it's military power, it's definitely a force, Soft power is when you're using influence, propaganda, more subtle ways of crowd control, of civilization influence. You want to bring their minds, the minds of the people. This is mind control. That's essentially what this idea is. And they couch it in this language always of bringing democracy, bringing democratic principles to societies. Freedom of speech, that's what we want. But what they really want is freedom of speech so that they can propagandize the people against their own countries to a global international mindset. That's what this is. And this is just another group to spin in the web, another node in a big web of secret societies, put it that way, right? Just all secret combinations, all tied together. And the more they fracture, the more they create, the more they diversify, the more they shell off and shed their skin, the more difficult it is to sift through the layers. That's intentional. It's like morphing. It's like a magician. What is it? It's like a Pokemon called a Mimic or something like that. Like creates multiple copies of itself, like that kind of thing, where it's like and tries to confuse you. Or a Hydra, you cut off one head and 5 more grow back, or 7 more grow back. Like it's the same idea and concept. And I don't understand why it's so hard for people to understand. Like that's what these groups are, even though they call themselves like, oh, we're just pushing democracy everywhere. Even though the people who founded these are the big banker guys who are like pushing their money around in every facet of society to craft it so that they stay rich. Like these are your monopoly barons that you're like, oh, we're sorry guys, we didn't mean to totally monopolize and put you guys into subjugation as our vassal states. Like this is exactly what they are, and they're like, oh no, we're good now, we're good, and everybody just accepts that. Here I'm ranting on the Trilateral Commission. All right, so let's see. I just want to read the founding here. Actually, let's finish this. The Trilateral Commission is headed by an executive committee and 3 regional chairs representing Europe, North America, and Asia Pacific region, with headquarters in Paris, Washington, D.C., Tokyo, respectively. Meetings are held annually at locations that rotate among the 3 regions. Regionally and national meetings are held throughout the year. Most gatherings focus on discussing records or reports and debating strategy to meet the Commission's aims. Oh, go figure, right? How can we tweak and adjust and nudge the people here, huh? What do we got to do now? And these are the types of groups that if you're watching guys like Mike Benz now who are just going crazy and exposing and shouting from the rooftops their mechanisms that they have been using to soft power project, not just across the world, with groups like this, like the Trilateral Commission and guys like Zbigniew Brzezinski. He talks about him a lot, right? So this is a name you'll be familiar with if you want to hang with Mike Benz, right? That these are the very NGO groups that he's talking about the CIA works through, where these guys, business partners, all of these nasty secret combinations have formed an interlocking relationship with the government, with political power. And they're the ones that don't want to let go. They're the ones that are being elevated up by the people unknowingly because of this veneer, this magic trick they play on everyone, this clown costume they wear to mesmerize. The Trilateral Commission represents influential commercial and political interests. Ooh, you mean like a business complex? A military-industrial complex type thing? As of 2021, there were roughly 400 members, including leading figures in politics, business, media, and academia. No way. Oh, well, these are the very pillars that we're talking about that groups like this seek to influence. And it's not just 1973 when groups like this popped up. This is a modern version of old groups that we'll get into. Groups like one of the earlier ones that comes to mind that I was just recently reading and studying about, like the X Club, who was a Huxley-led group out of Britain, which was a group of business and political influencers who wanted to get in on universities and science and academia, the robes, the prestigious, the judiciaries of nations, as well as their academia, their positions of authority, to influence them, to shape a relationship that would be conducive to bringing things into a global order, that would be good for them, good for their money, good for their monopolies, right? This is the funnel that everything goes to, is this blob. That's what Benz calls it, the blob. Okay, so Trilateral Commission is just hooking other nations, built in 1973. We got that now. Let's see. Formed by private citizens of Japan, North America, and nations. Yep. And Western European nations. Oh, wonderful. Private citizens. What a good people. To foster substantive political and economic dialogue across the world. The idea of the commission was developed in the early 1970s, a time of considerable discord among the United States and its allies in Western Europe, Japan, and Canada. To quote its founding declaration, growing interdependence, again, that means connecting with all nations together. This is the globalist perspective, right? And don't get me wrong, I want to work with other nations too. Being someone who wants to, I'm with a lot of the America First principles, right? I think we need to fix our inner vessel before pretending we're projecting power outward when we don't have power to affect the change that needs to happen inward. Like, this is a sick nation and needs to be addressed. So, eventually, yeah, what does a charitable organization or kingdom do but help the kingdoms around it? And so I would love to reach out internationally and actually help people. But look back objectively over the last 100 years, what have we done? Have we actually helped people and democracies? I'm sure there are lots of cases where we can say yes, but the overwhelming trend is not a good one. And the tensions rising right now, both economically and militarily across the world and globe, with World War III being threatened, literally, and just the clown state that our American politics have been for the last 25, 40 years, are an absolute evidence that things are not all well, that all is not well in America, and we pretend that it is. So again, this whole idea of we're on the best track ever, and we're about to enter into the greatest era ever under technocracy and interdependent globalism. It's like, no, these are the same guys that have put us into wars, that are marching us into our caste positions for their own millennium. This is like they're finally going to flex their muscles of all the growing roots of subversion that they've put out there, right? So anyways, it says here, growing interdependence. This is, again, quoting from their founding declaration of the Trilateral Commission. Growing interdependence is a fact of life of the contemporary world. It transcends and influences national systems. While it is important to develop greater cooperation among all the countries of the world, Japan, Western Europe, and North America, in view of their great weight in the world economy and their massive relations with one another, bear a special responsibility for developing effective cooperation, both in their own interests and in those of the rest of the world. This is just like a bunch of like frosting on the top, like that spray can of whipped cream just covering whatever is underneath so you can't see it. A bunch of language. To be effective in meeting common problems, these nations will have to consult and cooperate more closely on the basis of equality to develop and carry out coordinated policies on matters affecting their common interests. And what they mean by their common interests is what they mean the common interests of the minds behind this whole thing, their agenda, the Trilateral Commission's agenda. That's really what they mean when they say their common interests. When they talk about democracy, it's their democracy that they've set up and redefined. It's not the democracy that my grandfathers remembered and enjoyed even. It's a castrated version, to put it lightly. It says, affecting their common interests, refrain from unilateral actions incompatible with their interdependence. And so don't do things that would mess up our being tied together, and from actions detrimental to other regions. So like, again, they're just saying like, let's keep our global connection, our spider web together. That's what this is. It's just another layer to glue things together. So let's see. I don't recognize any of those names other than, nope, none of them. Alan Greenspan, I know that name, right? Economist. Chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1887 to 2006. Not a good guy. Right? I said he's tied to conspiracy as well, all this stuff. So it's just like, put all of your heroes on the altar when you go to study the alternative history that is history conspiracy. Okay, so that's enough for Trilateral Commission. And we've got the link now. This is our first introduction to it. That's great. Now, let's also, Jimmy Carter was the other name. Jimmy Carter. Oh, welcome, Brian. Dorman's here. Elder Dorman. Bienvenido desde Mexico. Okay, Jimmy Carter. Let's just get a quick Wikipedia on him. He says, hello, world. Couldn't chat in the PC. Volcker was also a Fed chairman during Reagan, right? These are trilateral guys. Okay, so Jimmy Carter, he's the corpse that they the deep state is marching around now. If you've seen recent, it's pretty sad. Actually, I shouldn't laugh. I'm sorry, but this is a puppet of the deep state. This is one of their Manchurian presidents. Okay, so I'm just gonna do. This is what I'll normally do. Actually, is I'll just do a snip. So I'll take a snip. I didn't even read this. I just want the picture. I just want the impact of the picture. We know he's a president. We know he's puppet. I'm not that interested. I'm sure there's a cool biography we could read at some point in my life, and I'd love to. I'd love to read all the biographies, honestly, all of them. But I don't think I'm going to get to. But let's just go ahead and... Because Jimmy's going to be tied to a bunch of stuff, so I'm not sure exactly how we're going to make him as a node, but we'll just put Jimmy over here for now. There you go, Jimmy. Mr. Jimmy Carter. President Jimmy Carter. I don't know if that's how he talked, but in my mind, that's how he's going to talk. Jimmy Carter. I was born in 85, so don't hate on me. I was born when this book was written, so that's why I was like, oh, sweet. Let's do this. Okay, so there's Jimmy Carter. We know he's a president. And the book is alluding to that he's a creation of David Rockefeller in 1976. Okay. And I'm sure they'll go into exactly how that is, or perhaps not, but we'll see. Now it says, a caption, the conspiracy view of history. This is important, guys. This is what I just want to say, like, the scholars of intellectualville, they want to put the book, like, None Dare Call It Conspiracy or The Naked Communist, in some political tone where they're talking about, like, it was written for the Cold War, it was the views of an excited extreme mind. Like, they want to just compartmentalize the content of what they were actually saying, what the thesis of this book is. And I'll just say it right here. They're coming at you straight up from the prologue, essentially, and this book will go into it. The main thesis is that there is a conspiracy view of history being presented. We totally believe that. The Book of Mormon supports that all throughout time, secret combinations have existed. And where there are righteous people, there is the order and organization of God. And the spirit and the priesthood are given in certain situations where that order can be administered and shared, right? Like, it's the nature of man to order things. And all time and history and things are done by cause and effect. And the people who want to say that it's a coincidence theory, history, or view of history, they deny cause and effect a lot of the times when it's very plain, when you just look at the facts objectively and you don't just do what the state tells you, do what the textbook tells you, who writes the textbooks? Well, we're going to see that there are people very interested in getting in on that kind of authority, to have authority over what goes into textbooks to which prestigious universities or not. And it's these same prophets of the dispensation of deceit that we'll see mentioned over and over again. Okay, let's see. Abbott says, very sad to see we won the Second World War, but became the Babylon ruling over the world via the NGOs and other globalist orgs. Yeah, and looking at the world wars through the conspiracy view of history is definitely sad, and it can be shelf-breaking for a lot of people, I think. But it just fits the pattern. It's just like, okay, this is business as usual. This is what you would expect from a machine that's imitating the kingdom of God, but utilizing the riches of the earth to buy up armies and navies and reign in horror and terror upon all of the land. Like, it's exactly what you would expect. And so you would see these things as an intention of the enemy to weaken the will and freedoms of all mankind, and ultimately the Constitution of the United States, because that's what stands between these globalists and total tyranny over the rest of the world, is our Constitution and the American people and their will to fight and their ability to. So it's just like we're the spur in the back of the deep state right now, or of these globalists, of this mystery Babylon, that they can't quite get out before they unleash total control. And they're about to flex power according to prophecy. If we believe in the Ezra Ezekiel prophecy, and I do wholeheartedly, that they're about to flex power and identify themselves in overt fashion. That soon, I would say within the next decade, right? And I'm not saying like, oh, tomorrow this is happening, but like the trend is obvious. If you paid any attention at all over the last 4 to 8 years, you've seen how rapidly things have exponentially increased or accelerated. And even our prophets are talking about it, that the work is hastening. There's a compression of events. Things are accelerating. Like, even the work of temples has matched what I see as the breakdown of nations all across the world. And we're experiencing it, and we're kind of sleepwalking through it. I think a lot of people are. So that's why I believe now is the time that we can kind of go over these things, and I can talk about this conspiracy view of history without being totally dismissed as a nut. Because more and more in popular culture, conspiracy theory conspiracy theorist is losing its luster as an insult against people, right? And turning us into kooks who are not to be even acknowledged by the academic class. How many of these historians in the church, they will not follow me or people like me or anybody associated to a hashtag that was politically untoward, anything that they're, in their social spheres. It's ridiculous. It's so dumb, because we should all be, again, with the eye single to the glory of God and the building of his kingdom. We've made covenants to consecrate everything we do for that. And yet here we are, like, we don't even have the same vision. People can't even see that there's a conspiracy view of history that matches scripture and prophecy and actually puts things way more into perspective than trying to force feed and memorize the rote, boring historical narrative of the universities today. How many people do you know that love history because of the way it was taught to them? Maybe some people got lucky and had awesome history teachers, like Ether. I'm sure if he's still in here, he's probably an awesome history teacher. Like, you can bring your passion out, and it even doesn't matter if you're not showing the whole thread, the whole tapestry of how it's all connected. Any good teacher is gonna let their passion ring, right? But when you're so detached from a tether that ties everything together and gives your history and all these different moments and nodes of change, revolution, and inflection, and pendulum swinging back and forth, if you don't see how it's all connected, then it all is mundane and boring, and it's not exciting. But a conspiracy view of history, it overlays the scriptures, prophecy, modern day, latter day, everything. It overlays everything onto current events and history, and it makes it so much more vibrant and engageable. You want to just dive into it and feast upon it when you see things all connected this way. To me, that's a wonderful fruit. It's a bleak fruit to see everything as disconnected and in their separate spheres, so disparate, everybody in their own silo. Over here in your academia world, well, we see things totally different and only within their context. We can't see how they're all connected. No, that's the workings of a frustrated, a frenzied mind, trying to connect all the dots, a gullible, conspiratorial mind, somebody who's really dumb, who didn't finish college, who's not as academic or certified as I am. That's the attitude that we get constantly. This is exactly what Isaiah saw when he said the meek would make the wise look dumb. And that's what we see today when you have people wanting to point at the obvious, saying the emperor is wearing no clothes. And everybody else is like, no, well, let's hold on real quick, actually. Define emperor. Now, define clothes. Now, if we actually define it in this way, isn't it possible that what you're saying might be without the realm of possibilities? It's just ridiculous to me. It's ad nauseum making me want to vomit all the time, and I have to control myself. And, all right, pardon my passion there. Ether says, my students say I'm their favorite for an A. Wonderful, Ether. You're my favorite. Please give me an A. Let's see. Abbott says 5 weeks left. Right. In the Ezra Eagle prophecy timeline kind of thing. Drones have me watching the skies. Okay. And the drones are funny. But again, I think anybody focusing on the drones is, again, they're like the cat that's really, really happy to see the laser pointer and not like the person who can see the guy pointing the laser pointer. It's kind of funny to watch everybody up in arms about this. Especially when you start to see the corruption of science and technology going back hundreds of years. And that these very technologies, they're like, oh my gosh, what is this, aliens? Like 200 years ago, there were guys talking about plasma, electricity, and defying gravity using those principles. And then those things, those areas of physics and how they branched and merged together and understood things, they were totally forked and they were separated. And they were like, nope, we can't talk about these things anymore. And all that technology went hidden. The Tesla type technology, the free energy type electricity technologies, like all this stuff went dark for 100 years and we didn't make significant advancements. Now they threw some bones at us with space journeys and landing on the moon and wonderful things, right? And they just changed their theories over and over again. And the structure they built on a faulty foundation where they were trying to hide and fudge things so that they could maintain their monopoly power and their financial and governmental and political and military power that they had subverted, they've got to keep the technology stuff under wraps as well. And so for anybody thinking that we're being visited by some other species or that this is it, like you're falling for the alien deception, and it's plain as day if you step back and look at the conspiracy view of history. So we'll get there, I'm sure, but let's dive here first. Because the Rockefellers, all these same groups that you see tied to these social engineering type projects are the very ones funding all of your alien disclosure groups, like your Blink-182 guy, what's his name? And his whole, I got tapped on the shoulder by some CIA guys, some super military high-ups who know about the secret programs, and they told me, they're going to share me all the knowledge. Like, this guy is just a filter for a narrative to be fed to dumb people. Okay, so don't be a dumb person. Don't listen to the Blink-182 guy for your alien knowledge and disclosure. It's not happening. He's a CIA plant or a whatever organization plant, right? And it's again, it's obvious when you start to look at the conspiratorial view of history and who's funding these groups. Okay. Brian says, my favorite history teacher is the economist Martin Armstrong. He pulls no punches. I'm not familiar with Martin, but that sounds exciting. If an economist can get your your learning light flowing, then I'm very excited for you. All right. Finally, the conspiracy view of history. People from time to time ask me what I think of the conspiracy view of history. Now, this is Gary North writing this prologue, so again, this is why he's saying this. By training, I'm a historian. I even have a PhD in the field. This means that I had 3 choices when I got out of school. He's being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but it's funny. He says, I can go into teaching and starve, or I can stay out of teaching and starve, or I can go into business and not starve. Maybe. I did the latter, and I haven't starved so far. But I still read a lot of history books. I just can't stop. It's kind of a legal addiction. I'm not only a historian by training, I'm a Christian by conviction. You need to understand something about serious Christians and serious Jews. They have a view of history which is personal. God created the world. And I would say this is exactly on par with us. I agree wholeheartedly. Amen, brother. He says the world is not now, nor has it ever been, an impersonal product of random material forces. Just think of that phrasing and how if you want to talk about popular physics and modern cosmology, this is exactly what they tell you it is. Impersonal, disconnected product of random collisions and material forces coming together randomly. No organization, no structure. I mean, well, there's organization, but it's just, it's just random. Just there's so much randomness out there. It's just wild. It says men are responsible personal agents, responsible primarily to God. Again, here's agency is what we're talking about. And this harmonizes with this view. These principles that Ezra Taft Benson's pointing to in these books that are tied to what they're saying are agency, the very thing that was fought over in the beginning that got Lucifer and his secret combinations cast out for rebellion even in the preexistence. That same thing, that same conspiracy continues today. That same conspiracy drives the history of the world and the nations of it. The nations of the Gentiles and their militaries, their armies and their navies. I don't understand how you can't see that there's a conspiracy view of history that 100% supports the views and visions of the prophets and everything they've seen and said about things past, things present, and things shortly to come to pass. And we have been exhorted that it is expedient for us to understand these things pertaining to the kingdom of God if we are to be true prophets, high priests, kings, anointed to become such and rule and reign over the world with Christ himself, right? Like this is exactly the kind of stuff that we should be keen on fitting into the gospel puzzle. Blah, blah, blah. I didn't starve. I'm a historian. I went into business, so I'm rich, is what he's saying. He says, now, I'm not only a historian by training, I'm a Christian. Okay. The world is not now, I said that, we've been personal agents. Here's where I left off. Responsible primarily to God and secondarily to each other. Love God with all, as thyself, and then love thy neighbor. Here they are, the first great commandments. And secondarily to each other through institutional arrangements. Yes, right? Neighbors is an institutional arrangement. If I'm a resident of my home and you're a neighbor next door, or citizens together in general, be civil, right? This is an institutional arrangement. Church, state, family, economy. Or yeah, break it down to the family. Like I have, it's an institution that has agency and responsibility to each other, like baked into it. It's built into it. It's in the fabric of who we are. This is what I'm getting at. This is what I'm understanding from what he's putting out there. Church, state, family, economy. I capitalize state when I refer to civil governments in general. I don't capitalize it when I refer to the regional legal jurisdiction known as a state, like Arizona or something like that. But state, when he's talking about civil governments in general, like the idea of the state controlling propaganda, that idea. Furthermore, biblical religion sees history as the product of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, between God and Satan, between redeemed men and rebellious men. This struggle is innately and inescapably personal. This struggle is not simply personal, however, it is inherently conspiratorial. Here's the tie-in, right? So we agree all of this is basically our doctrine, especially our understanding of the pre-existence, which the rest of the Christian world doesn't necessarily have to overlay and see this so clearly, right? That this cosmic struggle truly is that. It goes to the very beginning when the anointing of Jesus took place in that first council, or that council of creation. And this is the fight between good and evil. This is our current probationary state, is to experience this, to go through this and to rise above it, to rise above the rebellion and the temptation for it. And it's inescapably personal. Like everybody's got to struggle with. This is what the atonement helps to regulate, fix, to mediate. This struggle is not simply personal, however, it is inherently conspiratorial. The Bible teaches about a great conspiracy against God. It is a conspiracy which affects every area of life, including politics. David wrote in Psalm 2, "Why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in wrath and vex them in his sore displeasure." Psalms 2, 1-5. This is it. Again, he's saying, in David's day, there was a conspiracy amongst the kings of the earth against God. Also, long before David's day. That conspiracy is still raging. If we read the book of Enoch, that conspiracy was before the flood too. That was, what was the conspiracy of Cain and Abel, right? We know from the book of Ether as well that these things are ancient and persistent, and they've always existed where man is and can be tempted by Satan. For as long as there is history in sin, members of this conspiracy will be enraged at righteousness. They're in direct opposition to it. The conspirators breathe together. And I love that because it's diving into the etymology here of the word conspire, conspirators, where con equals, what's the next? With, like in Spanish or Latin, con is that means with, right? And spire is breath. So conspire is breathe together. They breathe together against God and God's law. They try to create against the laws of divine creation, like a Tower of Babeling, like their speech being confused, right? They're breathing together, being confused. The same idea, conspiracy. And in my King and Kingdoms article, we go over this a lot too. Just saying. Oh, Ether heading out. He says, "Night, Leland, and everyone. Thank you for sharing." No problem, man. Thanks for stopping in. It's a blast. Let's see what else. Other comments I missed. Abbott says, best guess on date for a major Ezra Eagle event. Christmas, New Year's, per George Albert Smith prophecy. J14 or another. Yeah, I don't know. And I'm open to all of them. I think the closer it gets to, I mean, the more time we have, the better. It's just a mercy. I'm taking every day as a blessing. And so I think, to me, there's been no negative in having a view that has faith in this type of understanding of the world. I'm at peace. I know that God's in control. I understand what the end story is. I know what the next step is. I know I'm not going to be surprised by any rug pulls. My faith won't be shaken because the prophet didn't tell me that this thing was going to happen, when I see clearly in his messaging a preparation for a mind state of the people to have to endure like tribulation, worldly falling situations. So I don't know. I don't know what Christmas would be sad. But again, if we're talking about an escalation in terror, which is what we should be expecting, then that would be fitting. Something on a holy day, a holiday for America, kind of an in-your-face Christianity in Western society might be fitting for this occult type of slapback, which I feel is coming. So I don't know. I don't like to make predictions like that. I obviously want to warn everybody and say, hey, be aware that things could happen on these dates. But when they happen, our role is not to like sound the alarm and with a chicken, or like a chicken with their head cut off, like just put everybody in a frenzy. No, our role is going to be to comfort and explain the peace that comes through a righteous endurance of the tribulations that will befall us. And you know what? I pray and hope every day that it's not as dire and desperate as many people feel it might be. That maybe the Lord's mercy will allow us to find positive even through it all. Or that our burdens might be lightened, like we see in the Book of Mormon with certain groups under various circumstances. Okay, so they breathe together. They breathe against God and God's law, and they also against all those who are faithful to God, or who may not even believe in God, but who are faithful to God's precepts. Western civilization's moral and especially legal foundations were constructed in terms of biblical morality and biblical law. Thus, the conspirators are at war against Western civilization. It outrages them. No one, and this is what we believe as well, with the Constitution being inspired by, or being set up and established by divinely inspired men. Men at God's direction to set up this means to freedoms, and freedom of religion, and freedom of establishing a Zion-like society. Now, those freedoms have been eroded drastically from what they originally were set out to be, and I think that's why we're at, again, this inflection point that we feel and are experiencing. So no one has described their outrage more graphically than the English Christian scholar and novelist C.S. Lewis in his magnificent novel, That Hideous Strength, in 1945. And let's just go ahead and... Oh man, it won't let me copy. I forgot Kindles like that. So I just want to look at the cover and just see That Hideous Strength. I have not read this book, so again, this will be something I would definitely put on the list now. I like to look at all the colors, kind of the evolution or the different ones that are out there. Okay, interesting. A lot of cosmic symbolism on them. Mind control type symbolism. To me, like even the occult versions of planetary Zion, like this, even the pillar leading to an arch in the center with the face, like this is Saturnian. This is occult or subconscious, even like in the. And I know C.S. Lewis understood things like Jung and the different archetypes and stuff like that, but he incorporated them in his writing. So I understand it. He knew that. But this is what I see this as: is he's describing the hideous strength. He's describing the inverted Zion, kind of, as we're going to see alluded to here in call it conspiracy. Okay, so he says That Hideous Strength. Here's a book. He says no one's described their outrage more graphically than C.S. Lewis in this book. In this novel, Lewis creates a science fiction story about a government-funded scientific research organization. And immediately to my mind comes DARPA, right? Like this is the kind of thing that you talk about. This is what spawned the internet, by the way, right? Like DARPA. But anyways, so a government-funded scientific research organization with its hierarchy controlled by systematically evil men who intend to suppress the liberties of the whole population. Okay, C.S. Lewis, you conspiracy theorist, you right-winger. What are you, some kind of Nazi? Like that's exactly what we see here from C.S. Lewis is he just let's create this science fiction story about this hideous strength here, where this super government group subverts everything and it's controlled by systematically evil men who want to take all the liberties from all the world. The very same things that were warned about of the great conspiracy of the Gentiles of our day. That like Moroni, Nephi, Jesus, Isaiah, all of the prophets pointed to and were like, guys, in the future, do not let this get above you. And here we are, like debating whether or not we should take President Benson's warning about this seriously or not. Like, it's a bad shape, boys. Bad shape. Oh, night, Abbott. Or Abbott saying night to either. That hideous strength, that's, this is Abbott in chat. That's his space trilogy. He made J.R. Tolkien the main character, basically, and it has a conspiratorial group trying to send human population to zero. Antichrist type figure in there, too. Never read it, but now yeah, same, Ben. Same with me after marking through this here a couple times. I'm definitely convinced I should read it. Should be fun. I just haven't been reading a lot of fiction, even good fiction like C.S. Lewis or I mean, I read the Narnia Chronicles. I love those books. I've read those several times each, or listened to them. I used to listen to them on my drive to downtown, my 20s. I listened to a lot of books. I think I owe a lot of my general knowledge of things too to just setting out to do that, just to listen to books. Keep my mind always occupied with something productive. Talk radio wasn't doing it for me. It was always raising my blood pressure, and I could tell that they were forcing conversations that were just tedious. So it was just like, I needed something more. Okay, they seek power. Let's see here. So here's this group. He's talking about hideous strength. He says this government-funded scientific research organization controlled by evil people. They seek power with a vengeance, including occult magical power. Oh, actually, this is something we need to add here. We need to add occult power. Because if we're talking about the temple and the endowment, we're talking about spiritual power that is endowed upon the saints through their temple covenants. But in the same parallel, in the opposing side, you have that very same attempt to harness occult power through the secret societies and there were different, what do you call them, like magical covens, the covens for witches, what is it for magicians? I can't remember. There's orders, different orders, occult orders like Ordo, Templo, Orientis, OTO. What was Aleister Crowley's groups? I don't have them memorized, but I know they're all connected. It's just these theosophical groups of... So what I'm attempting to do, and I've identified it already in my first few essays, way back when, was Melchizedek syncretism. Syncretism is when you bring all things together into one single unified doctrine, right? All things connected to the same tree branches. That's a syncretism. That's what like the Library of Alexandria and all ancient cultures and everybody who captures and overcomes nations, they're always taking their cultures, their myths, and syncretizing them. And usually they're fudging the numbers to make their gods the superior ones. And that's true. That's what nations have done. Everybody who wins wars reshapes and rewrites history according to their gods, essentially. Like the conquests and everything were done in the name of Christianity with a wolf wearing it as a skin suit. Like we get it. This is not new, but it's important to point out that magical power, occult magical power, is another pillar of subversion that I think we're going to see prophets of the dispensation of deceit are all going to be tied to this occult effort. Occult power, we'll just say, like magical groups. And again, I would throw Theosophy and Aleister Crowley and even the Nazi occultism and stuff that we saw rise and be dispersed through the CIA and our intelligence programs with Operation MKUltra and other things where they were essentially given free rein to explore these occult ideas and harnessing power to be weaponized for, well, we better do it before the enemy does. That kind of, that whole nuclear arms race idea with occult power was happening at the same time as all these other things. Whether you believe it or not, like, I don't care if you're going to come here like, oh, Elon's getting woo-woo on me now. Like, whether you believe it or not, these most influential people that we talk about and never mention it, by the way, some of them believed and practiced these occult things. They were like high priests in dark orders of magic and animal magnetism and occult practices that when you look into what they did and how they were structured, it would make your head turn, especially in terms of how it mimics and parallels what we do in the temple, in terms of altars, in order of prayer, in iconography, symbolism, vestiture, all of it, invocations, naming, all of this stuff, tokens, signs. It's all there in the occult side of the parallel of them tapping into satanical demonic power, possession type stuff, right? If we're seeking all the time to be constantly possessed by the Spirit of God, through his constant companionship, that's what it is. Don't get it twisted. And this is why I'm talking about righteous mind control, because it's our willing, conscious desire to give our will up, our thoughts up to God. That's giving our mind up to him, our will up to him. It's the righteous version of it, built on a sound doctrine of truth, natural law, and existence, right? Whereas the Babylonian floating building is foundationless, built on lies, built on power projection, built on power grabs and secret combinations, all the darkness, right? It's the inversion. Anyways, occult magical group. I remember I wanted to add that in there, so we got it there, so I'll remember. But let's see here. Let me read the chat here. Never read it. Ben says, random book recommendation on documenting the internet origins called Surveillance Alley by Yasha Levine. It goes into ARPA, which was the before DARPA, I think, or ARPANET, right? The beginning of the internet, essentially. Vietnam military industrial. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just vaguely remembering. It was like the stay-behind units after World War II. We wanted to make sure the communists didn't just come over with their own revolutions and take everything back after World War II. And so they set in these stay-behind units. I think in Europe, out of Italy, they were the Gladio units. In South America, like Operation Condor and these types of things, where we went in covertly to try and maintain democracy, but we were just color revolutioning all of the South American continents and pillaging their resources in the name of, mafias and cartels, and just setting up like the same terror organizations we see set up in modern day warfare, like post 2000 or post 1990s, after Vietnam War and stuff, when we shifted everything to the Middle East, where we set up our own terrorists and then we fight them. Like that's what we did all over the place after World War II, anyways. But like ARPANET, the internet was set up to be this way for these established cells to communicate information rapidly after World War II. And it was, again, setting packets back and forth, like the internet, the protocol was set up originally. And then it turned into the internet, essentially, through DARPA. And we should go through that history. In fact, that'll be part of the series, because the internet is huge in terms of the Mystery Babylon control over narrative, over propaganda, over truth, apparent relative truth to the world, right? Like the truth that Babylon projects. It can be censored and controlled via the internet. And that's what's happening right now, is we're seeing a restriction. They opened it up and let everybody have freedoms, or the perception of it. And now they're starting to constrict the freedoms of everyone. And you have this pushback. So again, this is all coming to a head now, but the history of it is fascinating. And it's amazing to see how it's all tied to the same military industrial complex. And it's nothing new under the sun. And it wasn't Bill Gates in his garage who just had this brilliant idea. And oh my gosh, all these people are faces for revelation of the method underneath, by a dark hand, who's giving you pieces as they would allow it, right? Little bits at a time, so that they control every bit of the narrative to walk you towards an understanding, a mind state. But okay, he says Vietnam military industry, blah, blah, blah. And then Abbott says it's 3 novels long. I'm talking about hideous strength, I'm sure. The final one there is best. The other one has him trying to keep an Adam and Eve character on Venus from taking the fruit. Some Protestant misunderstanding of doctrine there, maybe. And again, maybe he was delving into what Velikovsky was trying to put out there as well, that it was well understood by the ancients that these other planets were close to the Earth and possibly inhabited, or that there was ability to ascend up to them and back, or that beings came down from planets. That this whole idea is the seed of science fiction put out there by the occult societies in modern history, who are basically taking seriously the witness of the ancients and then rebranding it as something new. Nibley gets to this, I think, in some of his writings on science fiction. It's pretty fascinating. But okay. And to me, like, it all revolves around the temple. Like, this is all temple doctrine. When you talk about cosmic space travel, this is temple doctrine. When you're talking about creation, moving past this earth, this is a kingdom. There are bounds set to it. And so nobody's moving this kingdom without there being a response from its creator. And that's kind of the idea that we see coming to a head with the second coming, and the heavens being shaken in response to the wickedness of men on the earth. But Abbott says, we'll look into Surveillance Valley. Yeah, that sounds interesting for sure. So I'm going to copy this, because otherwise I won't remember. I'm going to put it down in here. This will be kind of this is my scratch paper. Okay. Continuing on. So they're trying to get occult power, is what this here. They seek power with a vengeance, this group, in hideous strength. He says that Lewis understood that rationalism and materialism can combine with magic is remarkable enough. What he's saying there is rationalism and materialism are these ideologies of the prophets of the dispensation of deceit. Materialism, rationalism, all of these ideas that shift the focus of worship to man, to himself, to the identity, to the id, to the ego. Like this is what Antichrist is, shifting worship to God to making yourself God, and all your rules reply, and do what thou wilt. Like you art the whole of the law. That's the whole the guiding philosophy, and it's a deception of identity, essentially. Like you don't understand your relationship to God. You don't know who you are. You don't know that you're his child, that there are rules to what's going on here, and that you're not God, and you don't make the rules, and you're not the full of the law. Like it's a total inversion of identity, and that's intentional. Like this is what rationalism and materialism do. But these words, rationalism, materialism, these are guiding doctrines of this dispensation of deceit. In fact, let's write these words down now that I've said it several times. I want to make sure these are things we explain at some point in some part of this. And like, I'm inviting you into my research here. I don't expect this to even be ready next year. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just creating this for the sake of creating it. And as it becomes a fruit worthy of honing and sharing in like a true form, like, okay, here's a slideshow now going over the history of the dispensation of deceit, or a presentation, like that's what'll be an ultimate product and fruit. But the real fruit is this journey along the way. So what were we just talking about? We were talking about rationalism, and materialism. Because again, these are ideologies that we'll need to flesh out and explore a bit more to see like where they get twisted, where these go off the rails according to revealed doctrine. And I can spell rationalism. There we go. All right, that's fine for now. It's ugly, but when it's ugly like this, it makes me want to fix it later. Like I'll come in and be like, what the heck? This looks so ugly. And then I'll just start working on stuff, and it forces me to think about things more. So again, this is how I stay on track with stuff. Okay, back to our book. I swear we're going to make progress. Okay, he says, so that Lewis understood that rationalism and materialism can combine with magic is remarkable enough. That he understood it in the late 1940s is astounding. He was virtually along in his beliefs then. Ever since 1965, or events since 1965 have shown how correct he was. Occultism is on the rise, especially on university campuses. And think of, this is written in 1985. Look at the world today, where you have the inversion of gender being a popularly accepted thing. This used to be an occult practice, right? That only behind closed doors did you assume the genderless, right? Did you assume the form of their idea of supreme creation, which is genderless, nothing blob, Satan's Baphomet. So like it's gross. And so we've got occultism being practiced openly. And I think this latest Olympics ceremonies was another witness and kind of a blatant in your face showing of, hey, look where we are at the world where we can do this. And what are you going to do but complain about it, right? Like we can do this. And it's paraded in parades in cities, like applauded even by members of the church. And it's just kind of strange. Okay, Lewis, oddly enough, he died on November 22nd, 1962, the same day that President John F. Kennedy died. Interesting. And the same day that English novelist, atheist, Aldous Huxley died. Wow. So here's some more names that we could write down, but we'll get to Kennedy later. He's going to be definitely a part of everything we talk about. But Aldous Huxley, here's a name of the prophets of the dispensation of deceit. He was a main spokesman of Darwinism, as we'll see here. He says, it was Huxley's grandfather, or Aldous, I think, was the author who wrote the books. Novelist of Brave New World, things like that, which again are kind of insights into the same thing that C.S. Lewis is alluding to, this system behind the scenes, this globalist oligarchy secretly puppeteering forces and controls and levers of power. So so he dies. It was his grandfather, Thomas Huxley, who first promoted and popularized Charles Darwin's Origin of Species in 1859, which has probably been the most important book in the arsenal of the conspiracy. Okay, that's a big line and something that we need to take note of. Thomas Huxley, Aldous Huxley, Charles Darwin, connection straight here, right? Well, I mean, he's just saying that it's the same day that he died is coincidental, right? Which we don't believe in coincidences, but sometimes death dates, there's not a lot of significance to derive from like, oh, look what happened on this day. Like, okay, great. What does it mean? Like, how do we understand the atonement better because of this? How do we tie it to the temple? Like it's, sometimes it's fun to see the connections and it helps to remember things for me, for sure. Like if I remember, oh, the day Kennedy died, I know C.S. Lewis died and so did Aldous Huxley. 3 guys that are kind of important in this whole scheme of conspiracy. And maybe that's why he's pointing it out, is that was like a changing of ages after Kennedy was killed. C.S. Lewis died, and he was one of the good guys, I think, putting good messages in his literature and writings before it all becomes corrupt by this occult magical power that was infested into Hollywood and the music industry and all of entertainment as an extension of propaganda and media and information control. Like, this has always been a weapon of the military industrial complex. The release of these technologies was done by these same like DARPA groups like beforehand. So like it's just, it can be overwhelming when you start to see how everything's connected. And it's sometimes overwhelming to me to continually point it out and to have everybody like they'll only comment and be like, wow, Leland, like, why do you care so much about this? Like, oh, wow, you're getting really excited. Why are you getting so red in the face, Leland? Like, why are you getting mad about this? And it's like, are you not going to address that I just connected everything though? Like, this has to fundamentally change your paradigm. And now you're in denial and want to just point at my red face or my passion about it. And it's just like, it can be distracting. So it's good to do this in long form, because then you don't get to make that excuse and we have to deal with the content. Okay. So so let's write these down. We got Charles Darwin, Thomas Huxley, Aldous Huxley. These are names that we want to identify in our prophets of deceit here. So I'm just going to add more boxes. And probably throughout the week, I'll create these out a little more, because I could sit here and just like mess with the borders on this for like 10 minutes and everybody's like, what the heck are you doing, Leland? But trust me, I'm meditating, all right? Because then there will be an inspiration and I'll know what to do and what to change, and it happens. Like, there's a method to the madness, and not 3 Karl Marxes. That's not what we want. So we want Charles Darwin. This is a huge pillar, and it's just funny to me, like, because I have this view of history that these guys are like the ultimate obvious bad guys in a plot to subvert ideologies. And then you have members of the church, very prominent ones on social media, who are like total shills for Charles Darwin and evolution. And, this totally works with the gospel. And you just have to ignore all the other stuff about world domination and communism and blah, blah, blah that goes with it, that they slip in. Like, it's just interesting to me that, like, okay, when there are clear options that like you don't have to force it. Like, I don't understand why it's not like worthwhile to look at. Okay, we said Aldous Huxley or Thomas Huxley, and I think he's the one involved in the X Club. So that's a big name for us, because X Club's going to come back. X Club's going to come back big time in terms of on the main social media, or connected to the main social media platform that all of us are connecting on, or most of you connect with me on Twitter, now X, right? There's some, I think, some occult nods, some hat tips going on with what's happening in current pop culture with Elon Musk and his occult ties, and just society in general, this battle between these globalists who have a long-term plan and process. And that's something else I just reminded of that I have pulled up here in section 38 to mark out. We want to talk about how the Lord identified the conspiracy to Joseph Smith as a conspiracy of time, through process of time, of them through long, slow means, the Fabian modus operandi, method of operating, right? The Fabian war of accretion. That's what this is. So we've got to look at it that way. If you just dismiss it as like, no, we won, we're good guys, like everything's great now, there's no bad guys, like there's no world dominating force, are you crazy? Like, we're so awesome right now, look, we got driving cars, like, lighten up. It's like, guys, like, it's exactly what somebody with their head in the sand would say. Aldous, that's not how you spell it. How is it spelled, my friends? A-L-D, Aldous. That doesn't look right. Is that really what it is? O-U-S? Or am I just being dumb right now? Yeah, O-U-S. A-L-D-O-U-S. Aldous Huxley. Don't underline it. Make me second guess myself. Jerk faces. Let's go ahead and add that to our dictionary, so I don't get triggered by the red line. All right, Aldous Huxley. So there's our 3, and that took forever, but I'm telling you, this is how you learn things. This is how you really seed them in your brain, is that you put effort into your learning. You don't just, I read that book and I don't remember anything. Like, the more you tie it to things, the more you try to explain it to people. Like, I'm only going to get better at explaining these things to other people in the future, because I'm doing this and sharing this with you and taking the time to do it. But I would be doing this anyways if I wasn't streaming. So that's why I think what gets lost in translation a lot of times when I'm talking to people is that I assume everybody is kind of working along the same program to be like, all right, I've got to learn these things. These are important. This is something I have to work into my worldview. And not everybody's there. So I've got to be more patient. All right, we've got these big names in yellow. Let's go back to our book. So it's just interesting, huh? A transition of times, it feels like is what he's getting at here. So defining conspiracy. Remember, I've been doing a lot of tangents, but we're talking about the history, the history of conspiracy, oh man, I've already butchered it. The conspiracy view of history versus the coincidence view of history. So defining conspiracy, he says, let us get one thing perfectly clear. As Richard Nixon used to say, everyone believes in the existence of conspiracies. Conspiracies are organized groups of people who maliciously plot to undermine whatever it is you believe in. Obviously, what you believe in is good, so they are evil. Since there are also fringe groups who have not yet seen the light and who plot against goodness and true justice, those who believe in goodness and true justice need to defend themselves by stamping out these illegal groups. So this is the idea. He's talking about there are groups of people who plot against you maliciously to undermine your freedoms, your money, your earnings, your ability to grow, just all of it, your liberties. And so it's our responsibility, who are good, to stamp those groups out, point at them, say, hey, this is not okay. This is not kosher. This is not good with our doctrine. This is not constitutional. Like, this is the idea of, well, what can we do? It's so big now, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't matter. Like, you can do your part by being educated. Being educated is like the first step. I want to hear you talking about, we have no power to do anything if you have no idea what's going on. Like, get educated first. And if you have a really solid explanation for why you feel there's nothing in your power that you can do, not even by explaining the conspiracy to others, it seems like I don't really want to hear what you have to say, because everybody can do that. Everybody can go out on the limb, put your social credit on the line, and say something like, you know what, I really don't agree with that view of things. I think I see this way lines up better with what prophets have said. And I feel like that explains things happening more than wow, everything's crazy, isn't it? Wow, we're so dumb now, aren't we? Like, wow, we've just retarded into total destruction. And that's not what's happened. We've been intentionally led backwards by people willing to shake up the whole game board to restructure their control, to be more suffocating. Okay, he says, these groups are clearly illegal, since good and just people get their rulers to pass laws making such conspiracies illegal. There is nothing remarkable in all this. Clearly, it isn't worth a whole book. But Abraham and Allen went off the deep end, quote unquote, so to speak. They argued not only that there are conspiracies, but that there is one major conspiracy in 20th century history, at least in the non-communist West, and that this conspiracy has actually succeeded in capturing the major institutions of modern society, church, state, the media, big business organizations, the prestige universities, and the banking establishment. Take a breath. Because that is like the thesis of what we're talking about here. So people dismissing this book as being something about the Cold War, they are totally ignoring this fact, or they are twisting the intention of this book and the thesis of it, of what Abraham and Gary Allen put out there, just for political points, to be like, no, that's totally dismissible because in context, it's not relevant to us anymore. You should just focus on what President Nelson's saying. And it's like, sorry, doesn't fly when I've actually read the books. And what you're saying fits the profile of those people who support the conspiracy and who close their eyes to all of the organization of what we've experienced in event after event that continue to erode our freedoms. So I want to read this again. What is being argued here is not only that there are conspiracies and conspiracy theories that can just like, oh, you're just going to lead off into the deep end, Leland. No, but that there is one major conspiracy. So if you can tie everything to that conspiracy, that's the very secret combination that Moroni is pointing to, that Ether is pointing to, that all of the prophets who looked at our day and said, hey, guys, there's this group of the evil people that are going to try and take over the world and overthrow your freedoms and your religion. So you better be prepared for it. In fact, wow, let me put the title of liberty right in the middle of the Book of Mormon and all these war chapters all around this whole, how these people, these righteous disciples of Christ and covenant people were able to fight and work through this same manifestation in their day. Wow, interesting. Maybe I'll give you this as help so you can know how to act and respond. So Ezra Taft Benson basically pointing to these things and putting a finger directly at the conspiracy, the very same conspiracy that the prophets in the Book of Mormon talk about and warn us about would be amongst the Gentiles, is what these men in this book are pointing at. They're saying it's not just a bunch of conspiracy theory. There is one conspiracy. All of them are trying and acting in unison to remove the freedoms of all nations, and their focus is on America, and they've succeeded. They succeeded in what? He says right here, capturing the major institutions of modern society. This is exactly what we're talking about, these pillars of subversion. So what I have here is extrapolated kind of from here, except I forgot the big businesses, right? But you have major institutions of modern society, such as church, state, the media, big business organizations, the prestige universities, and the banking establishment. So if you control these things, you can control public opinion. You can control what is called, good or bad. So he goes in and breaks down some of this. He says, the establishment. This is the key word. The oddity of the author's original thesis in 1972 was this, that the conspiracy is the establishment. It's not like the conspiracy of the Bolsheviks against the Tsar establishment. And this is what those who are dismissing, none dare call it conspiracy, and Ezra Taft Benson's warning, this is what they're trying to single it out as. They're trying to itemize it or objectify it as this Bolshevik revolution type thing. That, see, there was this swelling of communism and it got put down. And that's it. But that's not what these guys and these authors and even Skousen is pointing at in The Naked Communist. They're pointing at something much bigger, much more pervasive, and much more macro, much more meta. And everybody that wants to dismiss it is in the micro. And they've got micro takes with macro egos. So it's funny. But again, if you just read these books and take the time to understand it like we are here, or anybody can do this. But we get bullied by scholars who are like, meh, make you feel stupid for having even read that book. Wow, you're so gullible. It's like, well, you're demonstrating in your scholarly pride that you don't even know what the book's about. So it's interesting. Wow. I wonder whose side I want to be on. All right. Brian says, let's see. Abbott says, I agree 100%. I don't know what you're agreeing with, but maybe I'll get it here. It can really weigh heavily and make you frustrated to know just going to work, paying taxes, etc., is building the Babylon apparatus. Okay, I get what you're saying. He says, very glad to hear voices dedicated to the Lord who see things for what they truly are. Thanks, Abbott. And I love you guys here. It says 9 viewers. I don't know if that's real or not, but it's amazing. Like, thank you guys. And your willingness to listen to me ramble. Thank you for joining me. I'm humbled. And then Brian says, I simply call them the club, TM, trademark. It's clear as day who they are. Yeah, exactly. The club, right? And you ain't in it. That's the famous line from, what's his name, that comedian. It's a big club and you ain't in it. And that's true. It's true, and it's obvious. It's obvious when you take these books and what the prophet said seriously, and you don't just want to contextualize everything to death. So it's all disconnected. That's not the fractal nature of God that I understand. That's not the all things connected through light and Christ God that I worship. All things are connected. All truths can be circumscribed into one whole. All right, so he says, here's the key word is establishment. That's the conspiracy, that taking over the government happened. Not that it was something that was overcome and here we are winning, because we're clearly not. We're not in a position of power anymore, economically or anything. With the BRICS nations rising up against the American dollar, the crap position the last 4 years we've been in, the wars that have started all over us, nobody respects us the same way anymore. We're at again, I just keep getting into it, but again, zoom out and look at what is actually happening now. We are not winning. We did not win. We are in a very bad position. We are in a dangerous position. And in fact, now that things are being shouted from the rooftop and it's okay to say these things, we can look and say it's an awful situation. Quite literally. Wow, prophecy fulfilled. And here they are above us. They've taken over and subverted our governments, even for the last 40 years, and we've been living through it sleeping. So he says, everyone understands this sort of conspiracy, like the Bolsheviks against the Tsar's establishment, like a small group looking to try to overthrow, right? This is not that kind of conspiracy. No, what we're facing is a successful conspiracy of the American establishment against the Constitution of the United States and everyone who was intended by its authors to be protected by that Constitution. How can we not consider this as a member of the church with our doctrine about the Constitution? That this is the thesis, that it's a conspiracy against the Constitution. That is a long one, gone through process of time, just as we were warned in section 38. And I didn't get to that, but let me think if that's here. Process. Yeah, right here. And he's talking about, for all flesh is corrupted before me. When he's talking about, man, y'all need to get purified, get to the temple, get a Zion mind. You want to be like the city of Zion and Enoch? This is read all the lead up. He's always bringing this cosmic language in. And because we like to snapshot the quotable scriptures or the scripture mastery parts out, we always miss that there's cosmic attachments before and after most of these second coming type phrases or these end time type clear, counsels given by the Lord. So he's like, gird up your loins, be prepared. Behold, the kingdom is yours. Now we're talking about kingdoms again, temple language, talking about kings and kingship. He's like, and the enemy shall not overcome. And to what enemy? We're talking about the combination. These people looking to overthrow the freedoms of all nations. This is the challenge to our kingdom and the kingdom of God. It says, verily I say unto you, ye are clean, but not all. And there is none else with whom I am well pleased. I'm reading in section 38, verse 11 now. For all flesh is corrupted before me, and the powers of darkness prevail upon the earth among the children of men, in the presence of all the hosts of heaven. So he's again wrapping in the cosmic language that he started all this in, if you want to talk about it in context one more time here. So he's like, all right, everybody's corrupted. And this corruption, this darkness, causeth silence to reign, and all eternity is pained. And the angels are waiting with great command to reap down the earth and gather the tares that they may be burned. And behold, the enemy is combined. I point to this a lot when we talk about the Lord is telling Joseph Smith in when? When is this? Circa 1831. Shortly after the Book of Mormon and the church is established, the woman is established. And who is there to bring to pass our destruction but the beast? That the beast in secret chambers plans, right here it says, the enemy is combined. And now, so the conspiracy was already combined in 1831. The prophets of the dispensation of deceit were being deployed. Their establishment was being set up in parallel to the restoration of the gospel and the kingdom of God. So this is the same parallel I see rising through the 1800s. The enemy is combined, and now I show unto you a mystery, a thing which is in secret chambers, to bring to pass even your destruction in process of time, and ye knew it not. So yeah, can we look at this in context and talk about direct conspiracies in the days of Joseph to get the gold plates from him or to get, to kill him, to do all, yeah, that applies. But it also applies to the whole plan, and it fits the Revelation 12 prophecy. We're just talking about the church in its foundation stone position, in setting the road and the red carpet for when Zion itself comes down to destroy the nations or to help in their destruction, to catalyze their destruction. But now I tell unto you, ye are blessed, not because of your iniquity, neither because of your hearts of unbelief. For verily some of you are guilty before me, but I will be merciful unto your weakness. Therefore be ye strong from henceforth. Fear not, for the kingdom is yours. Again, bringing in kingdom. It says, and for your salvation I give unto you a commandment. For I have heard your prayers, and for the poor have complained before me, and the rich have I made, and all flesh is mine. And I am no respecter of persons. And I have made the earth rich, and behold, it is my footstool. Wherefore, again, I will stand upon it. It's cosmic language. If we're doing cosmic perspective, when he's talking about standing upon the earth, this is restoring the heavenly temple, where the earth sits as the footstool of the throne at the bottom, where his feet stand upon it. And he will be a light for us during the millennium. This is that whole language, what he's talking about. So again, he's talking about second coming, end time, process of time destruction for what? For the woman and the man-child being born of her. So again, you knew not your destruction in this process of time, but he's telling you you're blessed. He's like, don't worry about it. It'll work. Just trust in me. This is the promise we're getting from the Lord, even in section 38, even before we're commanded to study all these things we're talking about. So it's like this is all throughout the Doctrine and Covenants. And I hope this next year people are going to see this. They're going to see that like this is not just some fringe thing, but that it's consistently all throughout the language of the Lord to the prophets of this last dispensation in our instructions in the Doctrine and Covenants, right? These are the covenant instructions. The doctrine was lectures on faith. They used to be, and then it was taken out. But that's like all these covenantal instructions are tied into the temple and into kingship. And as a part of that responsibility, my brothers and sisters, we should act like kings and understand the politics of the world and how prophecy and God's hand even commands them. And that to be rulers and reign in his kingdom during the millennium, you're going to have to be knowledgeable about these things to be of any use. Now, I'm sure there will be fast-track learning systems and a lot of education that's going to go on as tribulation happens, and those who are prepared are sent out on their missions. That's exactly what we're talking about in section 88, when he's like, when I send you again. There's going to be a lot of time to minister to those, to all of Israel as we gather, and all of those who come to Zion and reject Mystery Babylon when the division truly happens. Like when we start to see the sifting of the wheat and the tares. What is he talking about? He's saying here, I'm trying to look for at the end of verse. And let those whom they have warned in their traveling call on the Lord and ponder the warning in their hearts, which they have received for a little season. And he says, I will hasten my work in its own time. And then he gives us these instructions of what we should study. And he says, behold, he says, that you may be prepared in all things, for when I shall send you again to magnify the calling whereunto I have called you, and the mission with which I have commissioned you. And I think of D&C section 4 right away, like, behold, the field is white, all ready to harvest, and all ye that are, I remembered it in Spanish, so I don't memorize, but you get what I'm saying. Like this is the call to go out and to reap the wheat amongst the tares as they are ripening for conversion, for a discipleship and a covenant relationship with God. So, all right, I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's more for my sake to just keep it consistent. Let's get into reading again. We define the conspiracy. We talking about the establishment and how the conspiracy really is the subversion of the American system against the Constitution. So he says, in other words, there are conspiracies, and then there are conspiracies, he says, with an exclamation point and in italics. Oh, and I see some chats. Let me see here. Brian says, my father-in-law, the same Elder Delgado that you might have seen near the tail end of your mission in Chiapas. Yep, I do remember meeting Elder Delgado. Introduced me to this way of thinking 13 years ago. He's like, I scoffed initially, but I saw more the more I couldn't unsee it. Or yeah, the more you see, the more you can't unsee it. That's true. Like that's the beauty of like awakening, as everybody calls it, is like you can't unawake people who have seen things. Why can't I get rid of this? Okay. Let's see here. The prophets know, but are not in a position to let us know the details. Much as Joseph Smith said, he couldn't reveal everything. The last club come and stamp them out. The mother of all crash courses is about to begin. Yeah, no, I believe that we've been warned plenty. And Elder Bednar's talk reviving President Benson in this last conference. Again, this is why I have a lot of confidence in like what I'm saying, is because Elder Bednar is on my side when he's talking about just because the prophets aren't currently saying the same things that they might have said before, the same warnings, doesn't mean that they're not cogent or relevant. Let's see, I said ad ho to us. I don't know. Welcome to the chat. I'll just call you ad or O2. I believe that's true. One thought, look at how many members across the world are now endowed. Elder Bednar mentioned that temples are not to escape the evil of the world, but to overcome the world of evil. Amazing things are happening, and I feel that I'm starting to see a small sliver of what President Nelson is trying to get us to see, that we will see firsthand what Nephi saw only in vision. Yes, that we will be the people, small people, spread all across the land because of that horror of Babylon, right? Because of the oppression of this mystery. And we will be endowed. The Spirit of God will be poured out upon us. And the visions of Joel, in Joel 2, or maybe it's 3, where he's saying, your young children shall see dreams and dream visions, and your old men as well. Like this outpouring, we will be healing people and performing miracles. What he promised his disciples when he left, and he's like, you will do greater things than you see me do. Like we have that same promise, I believe, during this upcoming time of tumult, of conspiracy come life, right? Nobody's going to be able to run from it. You're not going to be able to hide. A lot of men's hearts will fail them in that understanding, and let alone when the cosmic things start happening, right? Like that's a true fear. I will fear. Everyone will fear. It'll be a humbling experience, but one that the righteous will receive gratefully and will be protected through. But yes, I love that comment, and thank you, O2. So amazing things are happening. And again, like all of this dive into these things have greatly enhanced my testimony of the prophets. Not any point in my exploration of tying all these things through Melchizedek syncretism or building it up on a proper foundation of the first principles, right? And doctrine and what the prophets have said and leaning into that, really leaning into it. At no point, have I been persuaded by any of the arguments that are popular today or in the last many years. I think that's why I'm such a curmudgeon on social media. Like when people want to bring ideas to me and stuff, and I'm just like, you guys are so far behind. It is lame. It is so lame that everybody wants to rehash the same things thinking it's novel. Like, oh my gosh, did you know that this is happening? Oh my goodness, did you know about this? And it's just like, oh, but I get it. Everybody's at different levels. Everybody's walking at their own pace. But it's like, I don't know how much clearer President Nelson can be about like, you will not survive what's coming if you don't get stuff right. Like get your house in order. How many times we have to hear that message over the last 4, 5, 8, 20, 50, 100 years before it becomes something we act on, I guess. And I know what the answers are to this, and here I am just lamenting, and I apologize. I shouldn't do that. Because there are so many good things. Like you said, think about how many endowed members there are across the world, number one, and how many more there will be as these temples that have been announced and that will be announced shortly, that they continue to be built, right? Like it's amazing. It's protection, communication, revelation, guidance from God, pillars of fire upon these people. Like this is serious. This is the protection. This is the lamb marking the lamb's blood up the doorposts of the Exodus before the angel of destruction comes to pass by. This is on that scale of importance. And that's why Jesus Christ is commanding his prophet to build these temples this way. It's that important. Just as it was strange, like, why we got to put blood up on the post? Like, well, this is crazy. What are we doing? Like, everybody here in Egypt's going to think we're weird that we're putting blood on our post. Like, come on, guys. Like, do we really have to do this? But they had no clue the imminent destruction that awaited not just the Egyptians, but those of them, like their own people who were wicked and decided to drag their feet and not come. Like, I feel like we're at that same inflection pattern repetition in our version of this dispensation. We're at that same coming out of Egypt moment where, imagine the children of Israel before Moses burst on the scene. I mean, there were his prophecies of his birth. So there was a lot more, I would say, than I'm probably trying to give it credit for with what I was about to say. But I was going to say, like, they did not know the deliverance that awaited them. They did not know the power that would manifest from heaven to literally kill the Pharaoh and his armies. They did not expect that. It was a miracle that they could cross the Red Sea. It was a miracle that they could leave in the first place and that they were showered with gold. It was a miracle that all of the plagues had happened leading up to that event. Like, they were so surprised. And so I apply that today. How many members of the church are sitting back on a high horse like, oh, no, so many things have to happen before this. No, I don't think, blah, blah. And they're soft walking, very stringent and direct warnings from the prophet. And it's not cool with me. And it's hard to, like, not be a firebrand to everybody you find that runs that way. Like, I literally have to just bite my tongue, bite my cheek, and literally pray in my mind to be like, Leland, stop it. Like, you're not better than this person. Like, it doesn't matter what you know. Meet them where they're at. Like, that's what I have to do every time and check. And the more I do that, the easier it becomes. But when it's people you love and you have high hopes for, especially like that, they'll come around and maybe there'll be a beacon or a whiteboard you could bounce things off with, and then they put up a stiff arm and they're like, nope, I'm not ready to have these kinds of conversations. It can be demoralizing, my friends. I understand that. I know that. I know it deeply. I'm there with you. Don't be discouraged. I would say lift your head up. Because every time I felt down and low and been rejected by somebody who I wanted to be close to, the Spirit fills the void when I turn to the Lord for comfort, right? Like, go to the temple. You'll find him there. And, okay, let's see here. Brian says, look up Armstrong, send his website through a DM. I don't have my phone. My wife went on some errands, and she took my phone with her on accident, so I'll check it later tonight. Yes, people are sleepwalking through the restoration. It's glorious. It's beautiful, and I think we're underutilizing the amount of information that is available for us to bring together, to bring to the one tree. We're talking about, bring it back to this book. We're talking about a conspiracy of history. Well, there's also a conspiracy or an organization, a patriarchal hierarchy of history that has been organized and administered through time from Adam down. And it's definitely the positive side of conspiracy, where you have good men working together to further the liberties, freedoms, and exaltation of man, to help God in his work, the ultimate service. Okay. So he says, in other words, there are conspiracies, and then there are conspiracies. Let me offer an example. He says, everyone knows that all assassins are madmen who act alone. He's being facetious. Man, think of this in context of recent assassination attempts and propagandized explanations about, like, the Donald Trump shooter and stuff like that. Like, oh, he's just some crazy kid who just got up there and totally passed the Secret Service. Like, it was just random. Like, oh my gosh, we were that close to. No. Like, these are coordinated attempts that missed by centimeters from their mark to totally changing the arc and forking history. So, like, this is, I can't take people seriously that. Anyways, everyone knows this. He says, even with the evidence points to the other conclusions. They all accept this idea that the establishment interpretations of every presidential assassin after John Wilkes Booth invariably conclude this. The kooks claim otherwise, that there's a conspiracy. So who's a kook? It's anyone who claims otherwise. In the case of Booth, again, the assassin of Abraham Lincoln, historians do admit that this was a conspiracy. We know that several boarders at May Surratt's boarding house were involved. I don't know much about this history, so this would be something that I would definitely love to look into. If anybody has any sources or recommendations on assassination conspiracy revolving Abraham Lincoln. Oh, here's one that they recommend that I guess I'll look into as well. Why was Lincoln murdered? And I actually did look this up, and it was kind of pricey. I didn't want to buy the book. I have too many things I'm reading right now and want to read that I was like, eh. But this guy, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, I did look this guy, this Otto Eisenschimmel. Let me read this first, and then I'll get into this. So, it says, in the case of Booth, historians do admit that this was a conspiracy. We know that several boarders at May Surratt's boarding house were involved. After all, one of them tried to kill Secretary of State Seward the same night. Wow, so there was another assassination attempt that same night that doesn't often get talked about. So there was a conspiracy, but then an amateur historian, what else? He's talking about himself. Oh no, he's talking about Otto. What else? See, he's being facetious, saying amateur historian, named Otto Eisenschimmel, got a book published, Why Was Lincoln Murdered? Or maybe he's suggesting that your typical historians that are establishment historians, they would never publish something like this. So that's what he's saying. An amateur one had to do it. A book which reveals evidence that points to Stanton, the Secretary of War, and other anti-Lincoln radical Republicans as possibly involved. This book is no longer in print. Are you surprised? This is not the sort of conspiracy which is discussed in college classrooms in U.S. history or in any other history. And he's saying it's no longer in print. You can find it now. Like, the internet has changed things. This was in 85, so you got to give him a break when he's being wordy, and he's writing a foreword or the prologue to this book, and so he's wanting to like zhuzh it up. So you gotta understand that when you're reading books like this. So he's like, "Are you surprised? Are you surprised? This book's not in print. They're suppressing it." But it's true. Like, that's what they do with anything that they don't like. Like, they'll just hide it for a while. They'll shelve it. And then while it's been published for 6 years, they'll finally let people find it. And then people will be like, well, nobody's been talking about this, so it's probably not that important, right? And it just gets forgotten in the memory hole. So you have a lot of stuff that happens that way. So it's interesting. But, this Otto Eisenschimmel, he knows and was contemporaries with Hans Anderson Zimmerman. No, who was it? Hans Zimmerman? One of the composers, one of the famous composers. Let me look it up because now I'm going to sound like an idiot. Otto Eisenschimmel. Good old Otto. What was he all about? Otto Eisenschimmel. Eisenschimmel. Oh, good Austrian-born Otto Schimmel. So he's a chemist and a historian, an amateur historian apparently. So Otto Eisenschimmel was an Austrian-born chemist, an industrial executive in the American oil industry, and a controversial author. Wow, so he's an oil guy. He may be best known for his provocative 1937 book on the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, in which he proposed that a senior member of Lincoln's cabinet orchestrated the plot to kill the president. Let's see. I think I read it down here somewhere. Maybe I made it up, guys. Maybe it wasn't in here that I read it. Okay, I lied, I guess. Unless we can figure it out. But I thought he was a contemporary with Hans Zimmer. Maybe not. Okay, anyways. This blah, 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 blah. Okay, Rush Dooney remarked in 1965 that the successful and continuing conspiracies of history are never admitted to be conspiracies. And I can move on because I don't really care if Eisenschimmel knew him or not, or it was just something that I thought I remembered, and now I feel old. The successful and continuing conspiracies of history are never admitted to be conspiracies. Their known activities are extolled as virtues and patriotic works, never as illicit activities. Like, this is what we're talking about when I say, like, oh, it's democracy. We're pushing democracy on other civilizations. Like, we need to go give them democracy. Send the tanks. This is exactly what they're talking about. Like, their activities of the combination of the military-industrial complex are seen as virtues and patriotic. We're doing it for the country. But it's all been a trick. It's been a ruse. But never as illicit activities. He says, legitimacy is the reward of success, and only that which is seemingly is admitted as acceptable party history. So, right, they have to scrub the history, basically. The offense of None Dare Call It Conspiracy and Cleon Skousen's The Naked Capitalist, well, you can say Naked Communist as well in both these books, is that these authors have argued that America's present rulers are the organizational and spiritual heirs of a band of bloodless revolutionaries who pulled off the true revolution in the United States through a nearly invisible revolution in the early decades of this century. This is the thesis we're pointing at. This is the content of None Dare Call It Conspiracy and The Naked Communist and obviously The Naked Capitalist. These types of books, they're not pointing to a thing that was just for the Cold War era and the ideas of frenzied minds worried about communists. That, well, communism's so over. Like, you don't understand what was being argued in any of the cases if that's your position, if that's the dismissal, the deflection you want to take. Because we're talking about a bigger conspiracy of the establishment, of our very governing structures and societal pivot levers. On the surface, this thesis sounds absolutely crazy. But wouldn't this be the best possible sort of revolution from the point of view of the revolutionaries? A revolution which sounds crazy to its victims, even 7 decades after it took place? Ooh, that one makes the gut like sink when you read that. When he's like, wouldn't this be the best possible kind of revolution? He's like, one that sounds crazy even to you, the people who it happened to. 7 decades, 70 years after it took place. And I would say it was even before then that these like we talk about 1831 when the Lord says the enemy is combined. And they were already working in the 1800s to promote all of these false doctrines, philosophies of men intermingled with scripture, right? To control these lever structures. So here's the offending thesis. Once again, through their domination over the major educational, political, and financial institutions, these conspirators have set the agenda, quote unquote, especially the intellectual agenda for the last 7 decades. The kinds of questions of this generation, half like this insignificant number, I would say, the kinds of 70 years, right? The kinds of questions that they asked are the only kinds of questions that wise and prudent men do ask. He's like, it's polite society to ask these things. The kinds of answers that they want investigators to come up with are the only kinds of answers that the wise and prudent men come up with. In short, they have established that elusive but powerful climate of opinion which governs the affairs of men. So climate of opinion, we're talking about consensus ideologies. And this is exactly what the club is that Brian's talking about here. And the deep state, the blob, like it's a climate of opinion. It's a consensus, an institutional consensus where they say this is what we define democracy as now. And it's our rights that you're infringing on if you say otherwise. That's exactly what they've done. Now, elsewhere, he says, I've called this process capturing the robes. Those institutions in Western civilization that have been marked by robes, the clergy, the judiciary, the university professors, were targeted a century ago by conspiratorial groups. They did everything they could to capture the leadership of each group in order to mold public opinion. They have been remarkably successful in their efforts. Again, think about this in temple context. When we're talking about governance, we're talking about an alter Zion, an anti-Zion, a Babylon that they're building. Capturing the robes is an implicit, like important part. You've got to be the one indoctrinating people with your coerced indoctrination, not sound doctrine of freedom and revelation that the restoration provides. The ability for us to say, hey, don't believe us and take our word. Go pray and ask God in the Book of Mormon is true or not. And the Holy Ghost will tell you. Like we can call down divine truth because we walk in that line. Whereas everybody else has to say, believe me, bro. Believe my expert, bro. Why don't you believe people much smarter than you, bro? Why don't you believe man, bro? Like that's the capturing of the robes. When everybody can say, wow, well, these experts must know what they're talking about. Because, man, they're in these magazines, they're publicized, they're put up in government positions, and then it's just, you look in the true web behind it all, you lift up the hood, you pull back the green curtain for the Wizard of Oz, and you see it's just this curmudgeonly old man slapping hands with his buddies and saying, yep, we got them. We put these ideas here, and here we go. We just click this level here and get them eaten out of our hand, basically. Now, continuing on, it says, we might also call this process capturing the minds. And here's where this whole thing molds into psychological warfare, psy-war. Again, what I talk about as mind control, as my second essay in the Cosmism Manifesto, saying you want to understand cosmic things, you want to try to sift what's out there in the world using a restored gospel perspective, then you've got to be controlling your mind and understanding that you're under attack constantly, that this is how they do it. This is their soft power projection that they've constantly been vibing off of them, their magnetic fields of influence that they're just constantly have on. You can't shut it off. It's on your ads that you get in your marketing. It's in the shows you watch, in the books you love to read. It's built into the scripts of all the favorite shows that you quote and comment on. It's in the music and the lyrics that were seeded to you to be so catchy and repetitive in your head. It's everywhere you look. This is the capturing of the minds. This is the mind control game, the psy-war, the psychological battle. And we have to be agents acting upon our mind. That's the exercise of faith, because faith at its most core atom is in thought. It is in choosing the right thoughts, which influence our speech, which influence our actions, which influence our habits, which influence our character. It's a chain reaction. And so people wanting to change your behaviors, what would they do? They will go to your mind. And I think he actually, I'm probably repeating what he says here. But we got O2 says, I'd love to stay, but I teach early morning seminary. Thanks, Leland. Night, everyone. Yeah. Thank you for stopping by. And again, I'll post this to YouTube if you want to catch later sections at your own convenience on double speed or whatever. They'll be up there. So I'm going to try to keep doing these as long as it's okay with my family. And we'll see. I have plans to go back to school next semester. I'm going to eat some humble pie and go the pathway route. And I'll probably report on that. But if classes and my agenda will allow, I want to continue doing this. But I just don't have the overhead currently. But we'll see. I'm going to do it. I'm committed to do it while I can. Says, Brian says, when we outsource our thinking and research to the experts and those that parrot out their talking points, we do a lot of damage to ourselves. I wholeheartedly agree. Okay, so we're back here. He says, we might call this process capturing the minds. He's talking about capturing the robes, capturing the minds. Because you capture the people in positions of authority, like the robed people. And what do the robes imitate? What Nibley's famous speech when he says, we are gathered here in the black robes of a false priesthood. Oh, man, I want to hear that. I just need to pull this up. So YouTube, Nibley false robes is what I like to type. It's probably already in my history here. Let's see. Nibley false robes. Yep. I just love to hear this section. Oh, man, this is very bad quality. I'm sorry, Mr. Bryce. Leaders and managers. This is a speech.
"23 years ago today, if you will cast your minds back, on this same occasion I gave the opening prayer in which I said, quote, 'We have met here today clothed in the black robes of a false priesthood.' Now, many have asked me since then whether I really said such a shocking thing, but nobody has ever asked what I meant by it. Why not? Well, some knew the answer already, and as for the rest, we do not question things at the BYU."
All right. Well, he gets into that. There's this pomp and circumstance, and it kind of says it here, but the whole title is called Leaders and Managers. And what he's revealing in my mind, if we're going to lay this over the conspiratorial layer of history, the conspiratorial view of history, he's talking about that it's better to be a leader than it is to be a manager, because managers will often prioritize what? Conformity and mediocrity. This is exactly what we're talking about in this capturing of the robes idea of the secular scholarly types, that they'll get along to get along. Like they'll change ideologies if it behooves their social position or their career, like a woman that changes fashions. Like that's exactly what they point out here. And this is what I believe he's getting at, because Babylon and the structure of the universities, like he said, false robes, this false robes class of judiciary and people in fake authority or man-made authority. This is what he's talking about. He's saying like they're groomed and indoctrinated to be managers, to shut up and work in the system. And you shouldn't ask those questions. And no, like be a good soldier and do your part, blah, blah. And to a certain extent, like the law of obedience is a good thing. But when it's abused and manipulated in terms of who's laying down what to be obedient to, right? In terms of your career, whatever it might be. I keep saying right again. I just caught myself again. I was like, how many times have I said it now? Because I wasn't consciously paying attention. Derailed. But that's the talk. And he's mentioning these dark false robes priesthood that we're again finding right here in this book. So again, well, I wonder what year that was, the Leaders and Managers, actually. Let me see. It is a good talk, Brian. The whole thing.
23 years.
He talks about the cap and gown and why the ornate things, and it's just so cool. The parallels too to like our temple garb and coronation or graduation ceremonies. Not coronation too, but commencement is what I meant to say. Ceremonies are like an ascension, an endowment ceremony, basically. An endowment of degrees with certain signs and tokens and symbols. And what year was this? This is what I'm looking for. 83. Okay. So this is after None Dare Call It Conspiracy and after President Benson had pointed to these types of things. And so that makes it even more interesting to me that he's well aware of what the prophet has, pointed to study and things. And he was considered kind of a lefty liberal guy. So it was like, oh, what was his position on Benson and these ideas? But this talk, to me, the underlying structure, the bones of what he's saying matches the bones of what President Benson was pointing at, that this book is pointing out. That's how it was meant to be. The mystery Babylon controlling, puppeting the strings behind the scenes everywhere. The Wizards of Oz. These are the ones capturing the robes, capturing the minds. And so it's fun to see that, like, these people who are kind of polarizing pictures amongst casual students of truth is what I would say, right? Like, it's because they ride this line of openly stating the obvious or stating what everybody wants to pretend isn't happening kind of thing. Love him for it. Okay. He says, it is incorrect to say that a man is what he eats. It is also incorrect to say that a man is what he owns. No, a man is what he thinks, what he truly believes in. Again, this goes back to our as a man thinketh. He's quoting this book basically here, and our whole episode on mind control and the Cosmism Manifesto points to this. This is harmonizing. It's like, resonate. That's what's going on. Okay, so it also is incorrect, blah, blah, blah. I said that. Man, I sound stupid sometimes when I'm just repeating what I'm thinking in my mind. So it says, shape his thinking, and you can manipulate the man. This is what we're talking about. You want to change his behavior, change how he thinks. Shape the thinking of a majority of the activist minority in a society, in any society, and you can manipulate that society within shifting limits, historically, of course. That would be your Overton window, is what we're talking about. That pendulum swing where they want to push you left, right, until you're way extreme to where they can renegotiate what center balance is, what harmony is. A new normalization, as Yuri Bezmenov would say. You are now normalized. So political or financial control over institutions is not enough. Temporary power is not enough. You can eventually lose control, or other dedicated conspiratorial groups, or two other conspiratorial groups. So therefore, control over people's access to information, and more importantly, control over the moral and theoretical principles that govern their interpretation of information is essential. So again, this goes into subverting universities, judges, religion, all of the things that form their moral and theoretical principles. This is what the Communism Manifesto slips in there in terms of inverting morality, basically, to a dialectic materialism. Now, lose this, and you have, in principle, lost control. You will eventually lose control. No civilization has ever fallen to outsiders that did not first suffer a loss of faith in its first principles. The failure of faith always precedes the failure of will. And wow, isn't that harmonious to our view of apostasy? I would say apostasy is always preceded by a failure of faith. Like you can't, it's a failure of will, failure of faith leads you to apostasy. You got to keep that spiritual motor that motor of spiritual gifts in good tune, working, humming. The offense of none dare call it conspiracy, and also the offense of this book, is found in the thesis that a dedicated conspiracy has quietly captured the power centers in order to further its own ends against what? So now he's like debating his own question. He's like, all right, now we've clearly restated the thesis of what this book is. And you've got to be kind of obtuse to get through the prologue of a book like this and then claim it was only about the Cold War or only about a certain era that is a bygone era that doesn't have relation to us now. No, if you give serious consideration to even what we've just read here, like 5 pages, like please have the intellectual capacity and integrity to do that and to say, okay, what is the underlying message here? I'm sure you would grade your own students and give them really bad grades if they failed to do that basics in that. Yet how many scholars will do that with this book that are members of the church that want to just play on the right team? My team's right. My team's right. You're not. You're not right if you're against the prophets. If you're bad-mouthing the Lord's anointed in public, especially. Okay. So he says, conspiracy against what? Here's where the rubber meets the road. To identify a conspiracy, you must also identify the conspired against. And the identification of the conspired against in both versions of the book is the same. So he's talking about both versions, the 1972 version and this 1985 version. It's against the true political needs of the American people, as revealed in the U.S. Constitution. Both Abraham and Allen are constitutionalists. They advocate what is known as a strict interpretation of the Constitution. If the Constitution does not authorize the civil government or its agencies to do something, the government must be prohibited from doing it. Then the question arises, prohibited by whom? The conspirators understood this from the beginning. This book implies that they saw to it that they and their allies controlled those institutions that can legally sound the alarm against any infringement of the people's constitutional liberties. The courts, so again, these are the robes, especially the Supreme Court, the Congress, and the executive branch, especially the cabinet. Also, they captured the institutions that teach and inform the people who generally become the senior decision-making makers in society. The media, the 3 major TV networks and the major journals of opinions, the public schools, and most importantly, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Chicago, Berkeley, Michigan, and virtually all the other prestige universities. So, recapping, he's saying, who are the conspired against? Who are these evil oligarchs trying to, get one up on? Against all people who are protected under the U.S. Constitution, their liberties. And that would be like the whole world, because we know that the U.S. Constitution is kind of the banner that's going to bring a millennial type government, a kingdom of God government to the whole world. There's a lot of great books on the Constitution and our gospel and the vision of Joseph Smith and Zion, and it's beautiful. And this harmonizes with that. I don't know how. Well, I know how, but it just irks me that these scholarly nose up in the air types just totally poo-poo all of this. It's just interesting. So, so what he's saying is that the conspirators not only subverted all of these very important pillars of society, but knowing that there would be ways for the public to sound the alarm against this type of conspiracy, what did they do but try and infiltrate and subvert those same organizations to quell any uprising or any, it's to agenda craft, right? So that they can get in and persuade through PR, right? They can PR their own conspiracy by controlling those institutions that sound the alarm. It seems like common sense. So he says, Abraham and Allen chose the title for their original version for the same reason that John Stormer first chose None Dare Call It Treason, a book in 1964. So if you didn't know where that title, None Dare Call It Conspiracy, come from, he's referencing an early book that, again, I would say talks about 1964. What would this have been? Like World War II coercion and with the enemy, and how we have traitorous, treasonous people still in our government that just pretended to switch sides after it was over. And we're like, oh no, we totally weren't supporting the Nazis or giving money to those banks, or no, we never did that at all. Like, here, bring those scientists over to NASA and we're going to work with them. Like I think this book goes more into that. That might be something to explore too. But it says in that book, they said that men dare not call the conspiracy once it has been, said that men dare not call the conspiracy a conspiracy once it has become successful in dominating those institutions that define what is good, what is legal, and therefore what is constitutional. It's like you better shut your mouth once they get controls of those things, because they'll quickly turn you into the enemy, which, again, I hate to continue to like point to somebody else, but this Mike Benz guy, if you want to look at what he's talking about, he's raising the alarm about this censorship beast head of the government that is raising up post 2016, well, post 2012, and even before that, the seeds of these things were being set. But like even with the establishment of Facebook and stuff like that. But apart from all that, there's a censorship movement trying to come up where they're literally trying to. I just lost my train of thought. But Mike Benz is doing the same thing where they're redefining what is good, what is legal, and what is constitutional, or they're trying to redefine just the rules in general through censorship, through shifting consensus from individuals and votes of the people to the consensus of institutions. Just as we saw all their institutions that they captured, well, it's much easier for them to come to a consensus among their leaders than it is to let the people actually vote and their populist tendencies to come through, which is what we've seen with Donald Trump, and why I believe the establishment has attacked him so hard, is that he's one of these populist movements that they haven't quite put a bullet in yet, or I apologize, that they haven't quite put in a violent... well, they've tried. So it's like, do you think they'll stop? Ezra's Eagle prophecy pretty much confirms that they won't. And the history confirms that they won't. That this is a slow-moving wheel that's much bigger than our hopes and prayers, that things might change in the next, or because the last few years of us like frantically repenting and reading the scriptures a bunch. Like, no, the wheel is turned, and it will turn, and it's going to turn. And that's kind of how I see it, is that we've got to be prepared for the aftershocks of what we know is coming, what you feel in your gut is coming. Anyways, so here's the offense of the book. It argues that what the conspirators have done is to short-circuit the true meaning and true laminations on the federal government of the U.S. Constitution. This means that Abraham has set himself up as a reliable interpreter of the Constitution, in contrast to Earl Warren's Supreme Court. Well, why not? So they're saying, like, are you saying that Abraham and Gary Allen are claiming to understand the Constitution better than the Supreme Court at the time, is what they're saying. He's like, yeah, well, why not? He says, we're all citizens here. Somebody has to interpret it. Since the liberals re-educated the Supreme Court, Congress, and the executive branch, why shouldn't conservatives try to reverse the process? Somebody has to challenge the prevailing misinterpretations. These misinterpretations are not sealed in stone. A lot of them are sealed in paper thin 5-4 decisions. So again, this is like Supreme Court decisions they're talking about, that a lot of them we've seen overturned in the last few years, with it being Roe versus Wade, or what was the other one that has to do with regulations? That was a big deal that got overturned recently. That again, that was an overextension of this robes capture. The Chevron deference case that was overturned. Again, just another example of these oversteps of these paper-thin decisions that have changed the landscape of control, regulation, business, flow, how things work and stuff. Like, just small levers, they can change the flows of things and it's confusing and can be overwhelming to try and track down. So I'm grateful for books like this and the works of people in the past. It takes patience and the willingness to do this, to like, actually, okay, let's read through these. Let's get a glance. Let's take these in. Anyways. Okay, so he says, we're all citizens here, blah, blah, blah. Most people are afraid of calling attention to this capture of power, for in doing so, they would themselves become targets of the accusation that they had become treasonous or conspiratorial. This is exactly what we see happening to MAGA people, the America First people, that the populist movement is now being, or was being targeted by the state, essentially, as domestic terrorism. And so you have the very people raising a warning against, hey, there's some corrupt pedophiles capturing the government and doing crazy things. Like, we should stop them. No, this is America. And then all of a sudden you have the American media and everybody coming out saying, democracy is being threatened. Oh my goodness, these are treasonous, conspiratorial people wanting to overthrow your government. What is going on? You need to get rid of them. Like this, sound the alarm, sound the alarm. That's exactly what has been going on the last few years. Like, this is dead nailing it. And it's 1985 that they're basically saying like, whoa, this could happen. It says conspirators against those who seem to be able to announce the standard of goodness and true justice. Oh wait, conspirators against those who seem to be able to announce the standards of goodness and true justice. So again, just calling to anybody who calls attention to the conspiracy, quote unquote, gets the reverse Uno played on them by the conspirators. Like, no, you're the conspirators. No, you're the bad treasonous ones. No, you're the ones. So they always project what they're doing back on the people accusing them. So what he's saying is like, people are afraid to call it out because that inevitably happens. Where it's like, no, you're the conspiracy theorist. No, you're the blah, blah, blah. Like, that's man, it's just, you can point to so many different cases of it happening today with everybody that's popularly touching all of your friends' tongues in what they speak and what they talk about nonstop. This game's being played. So he says, in short, the success of the conspirators can be seen in their ability to make their critics look like conspirators or fools. You mean to think that the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't understand the Constitution, Leland, and you do? Why, you must be crazy. Who wants to appear crazy? And yet, more and more people have looked at the decisions of the Supreme Court on compulsory busing of public school children, on striking down state laws against abortion, on the insanity defense which allows someone to shoot the President of the United States and escape prison, and they have concluded the Supreme Court is crazy, not me. And more people have looked at the collapse of U.S. foreign policy, especially in the last year of the Carter administration, and concluded the State Department is crazy, not me. And more people have looked at the U.S. economic policy, especially in the last year of the Carter administration, and have concluded the economists are crazy, not me. Look, even the economists are saying it these days. This is the attitude of 1985, my friends, when I was born, 40 years ago, basically, and it's only gotten worse a generation later. And it's proven all of these same points that you can say the same thing today. Look at the decisions of the Supreme Court that just got overturned, and like what was there to be unraveled is exactly what he's pointing at had happened. And what is the foreign policy but the CFR and all of its attachments, the Trilateral Commission and all of its bastard children, right? That's exactly what has infected our foreign policy. And we look at it today and we're like, why are we sending all these money over there? And why are we embroiled in all these wars everywhere? And why is our country, like, why are there homeless people overrunning the city in San Francisco? Like, this is just interesting. And then economic policy along the same lines. Why are the BRICS nations about to topple the US dollar? Why are there so many challenges to our economy when we should be the most prosperous nation on earth, especially because we bring democracy to everyone? Like, we're the good guys, right? Like, it should be paradise over here. Interesting. So, this shift of thinking, above all else, is what the conspiracy fears. It's a shift in the climate of opinion, the narrative. It's a shift in how you perceive things, your perspective. This is Leland here. This is what I'm all about all the time, is eternal perspectives. Because perspective is everything. In your testimony, in your faith, the perspective of faith is one that leans into the unseen without truly seeing it yet, and then having it revealed to you to confirm it. Your faith, your hope in things unseen to be knowledge. That's spiritual learning. It requires great courage. So, like, don't take it lightly that we're a small number of people who actually think and see this way and who are willing to adjust your paradigm, the way you see things, to line it up with what prophets say you should. So he says, this shift has taken place since 1972, the year None Dare was published. This is why the new edition could become far more influential and far more dangerous to the conspirators than the first edition. Because again, what they're saying is like, once you awaken somebody, you can't unawaken them. The concept of the people has, for over a century, served the toreadors, or the bullfighters, like of professional historiography, as a red cape. So they're using us as their red cape for the bull is what they're saying, to focus the attention of the victims away from the sword. The people's will cannot be thwarted. We all know. Watch the people march forward. The people will control the evil special interest groups. Federal legislation will protect the people, for the people have so willed it. Forget about actual individuals. Keep your eyes on the people. I believe what you're seeing happen in our government today is this shift back to populism, back to the voice of the people, and America's Constitution shining when that comes through in a constitutional way. It's beautiful. This is the revolution of 1776 and what made it so brilliant, with the minds coming together, understanding the actual situation of the day. So it's going to take people who are willing to look at the conspiracy of history and actually put it in its place, and the solution is not going to come from people playing Tea Party in the floating building, right? They have no perspective to see the foundation that they have saddled themselves to. Forget about actual individuals. Keep your eyes on the people, it says. Does all this sound vaguely familiar? We can almost see Dorothy in front of the screen, with the wizard's glaring face looking at her. Don't mess with the people. The people's will is sovereign, she is warned. Meanwhile, Toto is behind the curtain, pulling at the old man's pants leg. Pay no attention to the old man behind the curtain, she is sternly warned by the image. Larry Abraham's function is a lot like Toto's. There are some people behind the curtain who don't want you to pay any attention, and they are not the people. They've even gone to the expense of training the employing three generations of professional historians, this is what Nibley would call managers, to explain to you why nothing important is going on back there. So go ahead, tear back the curtain, read this book, and then you be the judge. This concept of club managers, professional managers, right? Trained managers to, shut down the conspiracy. But that's for a bunch of kooks. That's for a bunch of right-wing nut jobs, right? Like that whole position of managers, it becomes so obvious amongst Latter-day Saints because it's so antithetical to like following the prophet. Like their positions, when they're forced to truly express them, have to have them coming out against prophets like Ezra Taft Benson or Brigham Young or whatever it is for their cultural sacred cows, right? Like it's so obvious. So like I don't even get it disturbs me to see so many members of the church online give those people attention and to like treat them like they are some authority and not for the scum that they are and that they're like turncoats. Like, yeah, pray for your enemies and those who gleefully use you and also pray for those who intentionally subvert you to your face. Like, yeah, I get it, but doesn't mean I have to like it. So that's the end of the preface. We can jump into part one. Actually, no, I'm going to stop right there. Part one's not too long, actually, because it's the introduction to part one. No, we'll save it because I've been going for 3 hours and I'm starting to get a little tired. We might, let's read some comments here. We got Brian says, I once asked Spackman, I was trying to avoid the name Brian, but about Ezra Ziegel. He responded, it's pseudo-prophecy from the extra-biblical source. And if it were super important, the prophets would be talking about it. Yeah, that's what they all say. And that's what I believe Elder Bednar's most recent talk is a direct rebuttal to that when he's talking about, like, you think President Benson and these things that these prophets said, like, are irrelevant now, but maybe it's because you've had warning enough. Like, they've said it to you enough that now we got to switch to, focusing our attention on a bigger portion of the church population that is listening. And it's not the people in Utah, for the most part. A lot of them are. I say that biting my cheek because I know I'm wrong, that there are many, many wonderful people all throughout the Mountain West. And I love you guys. And I'm sorry that there is a polarization the way that it is and that you guys get a lot of bad rap, just like I just did right there. Just like I'm from Arizona and it's the same thing here. We got a lot of apostate membership and this church has been established here as one of, the pioneer states and cities. And so it's complex, right? The apostasies and diffusions of cultural traditions that have passed down and mixed together. It's a mess sometimes, and it's a lot to work through. And a lot of the boomers and millennials and the generations after have really had to deal with some complicated psychological operations against everyone. So I should cut more people slack. Okay, but I had to shake my head. I'm reading Brian's comment again. He says, I had to shake my head simply because the signs are there. Even my friends who are Muslim, Hindu, and Jews, they can all see it. An agnostic friend from Germany is spooked about what's going on, and she started opening her Bible again. Yeah, this is something that, again, the scholars will just like poo-poo away, but there is a true revival happening. Faith revival like the time before Joseph Smith and the first great work of the Restoration, there is a revival that is preceding, again, what I believe is going to be called and referred to as the second great work of the Restoration. This next phase in the growing of the church and the downfall of the nations, like Zion leveling up and Babylon showing its true form and hiding, coming out of the shadows, basically. Let's see here. I call this fight between that which is revealed and that which is interpreted away. Revealed religion versus interpreted religion. That's a good way to look at it, I guess. But yeah, because the interpretation is how they subvert. That's where they're gonna get in there. Well, maybe if we look at it from this way, and they just want to like deflect from addressing the doctrinally resonant. Abbott says, managerial state, the Leviathan, enforced conformity. Yes, exactly. That's the Hydra. President Kimball said that there would be no general warning to the membership of the church, that things would be shortly falling apart. We have been commanded to follow the signs of the times. Yeah, I'm aware of that quote that gets passed around. I'm not so sure for myself where it's sourced. So if you can find a good source for me, I'd love to include that in some stuff. But I've intentionally left that quote from President Kimball about a warning out of everything I do, because there's, even for me, that one's a little suspect in terms of like using it as an authoritative quote. But I agree, and I agree with the sentiment regardless of whether it's a real quote or not. I agree, Abbott, that like the warning is enough. Like Joseph Smith received the warning from Moroni. The first time he got visited by Moroni comes in with Malachi and Isaiah and Joel and talking about the great and terrible day of the Lord. Like it was not a, hey, things are going to slide into beautiful millennial paradise for you, Joseph. Here we go. Like, no. He's like, you are about to witness the downfall of all the nations. The Gentiles are done. Like, angels are waiting to reap down the earth, Joseph. Like, you don't know what you're, like, you've got to hurry. Like, that's probably, like, what Moroni wanted to say, or at least I'm putting words in his mouth. But Brian says, almost midnight here, gonna catch some Z's. See you next week. All right, later, Brian. Adios y que tenga buena noche. Hasta luego. All right, so Faith Precedes Miracle, chapter 23. I'll have to check it out. I've read the book. But all right, let's see here. I'm going to put a bookmark in this. And then we didn't make a lot of progress on my actual works here. But thinking it out with you here and reading this stuff, it gives me greater direction that, like, when I'm in my moments, because like this is an app, this Miro app that I have not just here on my computer, but it's on my phones, my mobile devices. So like if I'm out on the go, instead of playing games, instead of watching YouTube videos, instead of scrolling through endless shorts, like a lot of people do, which I'm not knocking on it. Like some people just need to like zone out after a long day at work or whatever. Like everybody's in a different situation. But for me, I've trained my mind that even in moments where everybody else wants to relax, I'm relaxed doing this kind of stuff. When I have to speak into a microphone and I know I'm recorded and stuff like that, like it becomes a little like more of a work. Like I feel like I'm spending more energy than I normally do because I'm not usually talking the whole time. Then I can't go for as long as possible or as usual. But the more I do this, the better I'll get. The more we go, the stronger we go, the stronger we flow. So thanks for joining me today, guys. Let me get some outro music. Actually, we'll pull up. I'll give you a little preview on something else I'm working on. We'll see if there's something random. Give you guys a treat for sticking around. But let's close all this out. It'll save it. Just free up some memory for my computer. I'm old Bessie. Oh, didn't even get into this. This is, I got to put this in there, so I need to bookmark this. Let's put it into secret folder S. But this is the excerpt I have in one of my essays from Latter-day Saint and scientist M. Garfield Cook, where he literally talks about and has a chapter in one of his books called Parallel Dispensations of Truth and Deceit. And so this whole section is something, as evidence, again, like that we can throw in, is this is not me just making something up because I have a frenzied mind, but that I'm looking at the underlying structure that so many prophets were pointing to constantly, and it takes a shift in perspective to see it. That's what this is. But let's look here. We'll just play this again, just outro on it. But yeah, thanks for joining me. That was literally just the preface of Call It Conspiracy, and we'll dive into part 1 next week, and I'll have it highlighted. I'll clean up my board, so we'll have more to go over on the web on my Miro board, and then what am I doing here? 5 eyes. No, I don't want to save this. That's what was holding me up. And I'll just keep bringing this along. So with that, thanks for hanging with me, guys. And wait, let me make sure it plays. I'll let this play out to let the video end and change the scene for you. But have a good night, guys. Take care.
Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise. Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise. Those aren't cries of happiness. The cold steel of the gladiator's gladius. Tip sharp at the back of the neck, whether wanted or not. A revolution we're having. They're deep in the state of the program. They are deep in the state of the mind. Yeah. Deep in the pocket, deep in the slumber. They're deep in the government, and now they're above you. Everything I'm telling you, they'll tell you it's a heresy. Cause none dare would call it conspiracy. But I'm the kook, I'm a zealot, I'm a frog, I'm a lightning rod, I'm a right-wing nut job. I speak and the vampires shudder. Full throttle, no handle on the rudder. Unraveling voices stutter. Cut to the heart, hot knife through butter, huh? Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise. Okay, I'm sick of everything. Perspective needing editing. Foundation needs releveling. How fragile, how unsettling. Okay, I'm sick of everything. I'm numb to all of your lies. I don't find you threatening. I find your 5 eyes unwise.